Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is killed by his best friend during the attempt on recovering Sasuke part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The wind sped through the trees, whistling like a child between the branches, shaking the leaves to their very core. A wind of sorrow and suffering that couldn't have been more perfectly matched with the grim face the sky had been presenting itself at the time. Straps of dark gray clouds, almost black, slid in the sky, letting the first stars of the beginning of the night show their faces to whoever found themselves in the mood for such activity. But that night Shikamaru wouldn't be watching them. Because there was something much more important, and because the huge fully black clouds in the horizon promised more rain to come. The wind sped through the forest and up the village's gates, swirling in the streets, trying to take away coats and other belongings to the unaware peasant, like a small child playing outside, cackling with laughter. But it was also a wind with the howl of tragedy, sounding like a pack of wolves, mourning their dead comrades after a particularly gruesome fight. The wind passed through the closed doors of Ichiraku's ramen stand. No client would have his meal here today and ran to the local barbecue in order to take a curious peek to the life of the people of this strange village of Konoha. A fairly large number of villagers were there, laughing and drowning themselves in food and drink, yelling in happiness that, to many of them, was nothing but fake, commenting on how good it was the demon was gone, complaining to the hell he had put them through while, at their heart, wondering for the first time, just what had the little boy done to them that had been so bad. The wind rose up and resumed its way. Those were not the ones he wanted to observe. A few lights were lit in the houses and, as Wind looked inside through the window, he would see a child playing by the fire, a housewife busy with her affairs, or just an old man sitting, reading the paper at the light of some candle lights, now that the sun's luminosity was starting to fade. There was a small humming in the air. The wind rose above the houses, spotting a somewhat large group of people, all dressed black, silently and slowly making their way to the graveyard. The wind hurried itself to catch them. The clouds were now right on top of the village again, and, as Wind reached the roaming humans, he spotted a young woman slipping slightly on the soaked ground, looking miserable and consumed by sadness at all time. There was a thunder which lit the sky in a yellowish color, deepening the sad frowns on everyone's face. The wind rushed between them, trying to make itself noticed, only getting groans and muffled curses at itself in the process. As she forced herself to keep up with the miserable pace of the Godame, Sakura was getting more and more depressed. For the most part of the last few days she had tried to put up a brave face, to show her strong side to everyone, in an attempt to ease the suffering around her, only deepening her own in the process. The thunder startled the girl, making her take a small jump out of scared surprise, making her slip in the muddy ground below her. She felt something cold fall on her cheek and reached for it automatically. It was a droplet of water. All around her, more droplets started to fall, but none of the presents tried to shelter themselves. The rain echoed in a monotonous compass, sending a sad music to the air. A music that matched the despaired sadness, the buried longing, and deep inside, deeper than she would have ever imagined, unknown to everyone including its bearer, the dark hate Sakura was feeling. She forced her legs to keep moving, even though her feet seemed to have been morphed into chakra-enhanced weights. She was at the limit of her resolve and only kept walking due to an unbreakable stubbornness. They had finally arrived. Everyone who had known him, truly known him, was there, to pay their last respects to them. Almost everyone, at least. The Toad Sannin didn't seem to have been able to make it. It was not surprising, since he had done the same when his sensei had died, killed by a former teammate, Orochimaru. The man just didn't do well with crowds. He preferred to pay his respects on his own way. To Sakura, moments of her relationship with him kept coming back to her mind. Despite her best efforts, it seemed her brain just wouldn't let her have a moment of rest. Naruto, running around the village, pursued closely by a bunch of ninja, just after having performed his latest prank. Naruto, annoying her to death at the academy. Naruto at the Chunin exams, refusing to give up, Naruto cheering her up in that same exam. Naruto. It's the promise of a lifetime, Sakura-chan, he said before sprinting off to catch up with the others. Naruto made the nice guy pose. He won't fail, commented Lee at her side. I'll bring him back for you, Sakura-chan. I'll train to get real strong. Sasuke. Sasuke, why? For power. Why? Why? Sakura was sure. She distinctively heard the question. She raised her head in a jerk, foolishly looking around, a glimmering hope trembling in her heart. But the sky was still dark, rain was still falling, and reality hadn't changed. Naruto had died, killed by the boy he considered his best friend. Killed as he struggled on a foolish errand, a suicide self-imposed mission. No, not self-imposed. Sakura had been the one to impose it on him. And because he was who he was, Naruto just couldn't stand and watch someone close to his heart suffer. And he died with a smile, confident on a promise that would never be kept. Sure, Naruto. I'll get the Manjikyu by killing you. I'll gain the power to kill my brother. I'll return home. Sakura clutched her hand at her heart, pain shooting through her chest, burning her eyes. The tears fell alongside with the rain, undistinguished. If it wasn't for the bloodshot eyes, no one would ever notice she was crying. Everyone was paying their respects. Shikamaru, Chuji, Niji, a crying Hinata, the Suna brothers, the Kazekage himself, Gaara of the Sand, a very shaken Kakashi, the Godame Hokage and others. A new bolt of lightning split the sky in half, allowing Sakura to clearly see, in the darkness, the photo of a smiling boy, with guts and courage rivaled by none, the hair the color of his heart. With whisker marks on his face, Konohagakure's most surprising ninja, Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, had passed away. Sakura fell to her knees, unable to cope with the pain. Why? She heard again. Except this time was the voice of a girl, next to her. Right in front of her actually. She raised her head to look at the trembling figure of Hinata, standing above her, high and erect. Why? She asked again. Sakura shook her head, unable to answer, as a lump formed in her throat. A powerful kick sent her flying backwards in total surprise. And before she or any of the others could react, Hinata was next to her, anger and hate on her face, darkened by her soaked hair, palms glowing with raw power. She was hit again more times than she could even count before the other girl was stopped by the powerful hand of the Hokage, with a little help from the only other Hyuga present, Niji. Sakura landed with a soft bump next to a tree. As the Hokage readied herself to punish the Hyuga heiress, a sudden feel of power burst through the field, before something knocked over Hinata, sending her several dozens of feet in the air. With just a flick of her finger, Sakura had knocked the Hinata flat on the ground. Tsunade knew the power of even on flick of her finger would be enough to kill a person, but she also knew she couldn't quite blame Sakura for it because what was in front of her was not Sakura. Sakura looked around. Her surroundings were awfully familiar. She didn't have to look to know, Naruto was battling Sasuke once again, and she was stuck in the nightmare that haunted her every night since that fateful day. Sai was there, next to her, unconscious, after being knocked out by a particularly bold move of Uchiha Sasuke, who was battling Naruto once again. And once again she was sitting there in the dusty ground, powerless. She didn't know why she couldn't help. There was a large confusion on her heart. Did she really want Sasuke back? Yes, of course she wanted. And yet she couldn't bring herself to help Naruto. Something pinning her to the ground. No. No. I don't want to see it. Please, no. She continued to watch as tears fell down her face in despair. She knew what was coming. She had watched the dream too many times, unable to avoid it. She closed her eyes in a futile attempt to keep the images from reaching her. But it was of no avail. If anything, her attempts only made the images bolder. She was forced to watch, as Sasuke, the very same person she had thought so much of, the very reason she had passed the most lonely years of her life, apart from her best friend Ino, the very reason why she chastised Naruto on a daily basis, the one she once had thought was the love of her life, trusted and overpowered Chidori through Naruto's chest. She watched as the blonde's eyes widened in disbelief, and as Sasuke's Sharingan swirled madly, becoming the feared Manjikyu, and the boy's mad cry of triumph and crazy happiness. She cried out as loud as she could, trying and failing to block those images again and again. In a desperate move she forcefully flung her eyes open, only to find herself laid back on a Konoha's hospital bedroom. She tried to calm herself, tried and failed once, twice and again, sweat dropping from her forehead. She wiped it, remembering that it was the reason why she had had a hell of a time in her fist times at the academy. And that it was why she had made friends with Ino, who felt sorry for the little pink-haired girl sobbing quietly on the park. Forehead Girl was still a teasing name her friend used in order to pick on her when they used to fight over Sasuke. She clenched her fists at the thought of the boy and tried to think on other things, not wanting to destroy the hospital. The mix of her bloodline limit and the insane strength she had gained from her training with the Godame Hokage, Tsunade, the slug Sannin, was not a good combination for the furniture when she was enraged or otherwise distressed. Her memories from the fated day, when Sasuke did what she thought impossible and murdered his friend, weren't very good. She could not remember much after the Uchiha had shoved his attack towards Naruto, sealing his fate. She remembered hearing him brag about his Manjikyu Sharingan and how he was now able to defeat his brother and rebuild his clan. She remembered how she listened without believing when he asked her to follow her to glory and be one of his trusting servants. She remembered him asking her cooperation on the rebuild of the Uchiha clan. She remembered spitting on his face and trying to attack him. She remembered Tsukuyomi. All the rest was blank. The others had, eventually, told her the rest of the story. Apparently, Sai had come back to his senses to find her performing medical jutsu on Naruto, desperately keeping him alive, even though he had no heart anymore, with a blank look on her face. He had made one of his jutsu and summoned Tsunade and a few of the others, such as Jiraiya and Kakashi, to help. No matter what he would try, Sai just seemed to have been unable to release her from her state of mind. They told her Tsunade had been forced to knock her unconscious to succeed in stopping her, effectively keeping her from killing herself from chakra exhaustion but, on the process, assuring the fate of the blonde shinobi. Not even the chakra of the Ninetales had took effect in saving the host. It was as Jiraiya had said, Kyuubi could only repair, not rebuilt out of thin air. After that, Naruto's body just seemed to dissolve itself into the atmosphere, on colorful streams of smoke, disappearing. At first, Sakura had gained some hope from it, but not for long. Jiraiya explained her that what had happened was not a jutsu from the Ninetales trying to save his vessel, but actually the irrefutable proof that Naruto's life had come to an end. The boy had entered the legendary life stream, the shortest path to heaven, where only the fairest and the pure could tread. Apparently, it had been then her bloodline limit had manifested itself for the first time, at least with full power. As far as she had understood from the Hokage's explanations, what was moving her body was not her as she was now, but rather another her. She had two versions of herself inside her body, two minds of the same person but, at the same time, with different behaviors. The scarce information she had been able to get, she had received from her mother. It was a well-known fact that practically all the females of the Haruno clan were gifted with high levels of intelligence, and what some people would describe as photographic memory. It turned out that those were the early manifestations of their bloodline, an alter ego which was composed of all the repressed feelings of the girl and held no problem in breaking the rules of society. It was known to be a formidable defense against mind attacks, and it was because of that that the Haruno family members were so good at genjutsu. It could also take control of the body if the user was in a state of high peril. Apparently, that's what had happened. She remembered the funeral. The giant toad that appeared out of thin air to pay its respects. She remembered Hinata and her heart almost stopped. Hinata hated Sakura. That much was obvious. It was also obvious that she held her responsible for what happened to Naruto. And the most terrible thing of it all was that she was probably right. A pointless quest, a childish and immature request. The ramblings of a spoiled brat was what the demands she had made for him to rescue Sasuke seemed to Sakura now. And as a result, Naruto was gone. There was a dark atmosphere in the Hokage's office. One of suffering and distress. Never had Tsunade expected something like that to happen. She had been convinced that the bonds between the team were strong enough. She would never expect the Uchiha to murder one of his own. Still, she supposed she should not be surprised. The Uchiha clan had been known to have some extreme instabilities in their branches, due to the fact that they treasured their bloodline so much that actually almost prohibited marriage outside the genetic lineage of the clan. It was a well-known fact that such behaviors led to mental instability and madness. Although it would be true the Sharingan would remain pure due to the genes being always present, it was also true that genetic problem affecting behavior, and even physical qualities would also be enhanced. All reasonable medical ninja knew of such facts, but they had no power to intervene inside a clan's affair. That was something that not even the Hokage had power to do, and the Uchiha clan had been left alone. It was now clear that the last of the Uchiha had surely inherited some of those instabilities, which had been probably worsened by the murder of the boy's family by his older brother. Still, there was something more, something lurking in the shadows. Tsunade could not perceive what it was, but she was sure there was more to the Sharingan, and to what some would call the Uchiha's curse than met the eye. With a sigh, the woman got up and looked through the windows. The circular room had only one regular exit, which consisted in a door, guarded by ninja every time of the day. It was a circular room, much similar to the one where missions were assigned to the ninja teams, although smaller. The Hokage desk stood in the center, from the viewpoint of someone who enters, and was slightly misaligned with the overall center of the room, so that the light coming from the big windows behind the Hokage's seat could give the best amount of illumination possible. It was to those windows the Hokage went, and, looking down, she was just in time to spot a small woman approach the building. It seemed that punctuality was one of the Haruno's qualities, although, at the time, the Hokage couldn't say if it was a quality or a curse. She still hadn't figured out how to break the news to her apprentice's mother. Another thunder made itself known as the Hokage returned to her desk. She looked down at the desk. The necklace she had given to Naruto stood there, unmoving and darkened by bits of blood, as if the object itself was sad with the death of its previous bearer. Tsunade had been through 3 hellish days, suffering the death of the one she considered almost as a grandson, even going so far as if wondering if there was some curse related to the necklace, and if it had been her fault Naruto had died. It was all even worse because of Jiraiya's disappearance. When her lover and brother had died, she had always been able to count with the other Sannin's shoulder, but it seemed he too had taken a hard blow with this particular death, even more so than when his previous students died. And as if that wasn't enough, there was the problem of her current student. It was obvious to her that, at some point in the struggle, something awful, horrible had been done to Sakura, thus inducing the self-activation of her bloodline ability in order to protect herself from such event. What exactly it had been, Tsunade hadn't been sure until the medical exam's results arrived at her desk, a day earlier. The diagnostic was clear. Vestiges of semen and damaged tissue on her apprentice's internal sexual organs left no space for doubt. Sakura had been raped. At first there had been at least 2 possible candidates for a beating up, if not something more gruesome, but after Sai had agreed to submit himself to scrutiny from Inoichi Yamanaka's mind-reading jutsu, it had been obvious who the perpetrator had been. If there still had been any doubt, the results from the cell's examinations that arrived from laboratory had shoved it away. Sasuke Uchiha had raped his female teammate and killed his other one. 2 sins in one day, and Tsunade didn't intend on letting him live past that, no matter what the counselors had to say in the matter. Although there shouldn't be much opposing to the harsh punishments, since most of the clans were on her side now, as their heirs were reaching adulthood, therefore being apt to assume command of the clan, and had been good friends with the blonde. The reasons for the rapping had been given by an unaware Sakura, as she described the ranting of the Uchiha about restoring his clan. It seemed he wanted to assure the continuity of the family no matter what, and decided Sakura would be a good enough of a host. Such word made Tsunade shudder. Due to her student's mental instability, at the moment, Tsunade decided not to tell her anything about it. However, the same could not be said about her mother, and Tsunade felt that, as her guardian, the woman had the right to know. So she had summoned her for the discussions of urgent matters concerning her daughter. She was also a little pissed at Sakura. It was wrong, she knew, but she couldn't help but blame her, at least a bit, for the fate of the blonde shinobi. If the girl hadn't been so selfish and childish, nothing like that would have happened. But of course, even the best person had failures, and sometimes, not even the Godame Hokage could think clearly. There was a low conversation outside, and, after a moment, a light knock sounded through the Hokage's door, followed by an announcement that the Haruno head of the clan was there, requesting permission to enter. Sakura jerked her head slightly to the hospital's room window, as an unexpected noise came from it. After a few moments she realized it had been nothing more than the wind, gushing against the building. The nurses had already came and shut the main light bulge down, but Sakura maintained a small bedside lamp which gave enough light to barely illuminate the room. She couldn't really understand why, but she had been feeling a sense of dread as soon as the night had fallen and had become afraid of staying alone in the room, in the dark. She wasn't sure, however, if the lamp was making the situation better at all, as its light would cast shadows across all the room. Even though she tried to ignore it, she would sometimes perceive, or imagine to perceive, flickers of movement in the shadows. However, once she looked there, she would never see a thing. The thunderstorm wasn't helping either, and she would often jump in surprise when a particularly close thunder would fall from the dark sky. She kept looking through the window next to her bed, to the street outside, where the street lamps were casting a pale orange light, where the droplets of falling rains could be seen shining, like kunai made out of light. Her mother had stopped by earlier in the day, and had informed her that the Hokage had summoned her for a private meeting. Sakura wondered what that was all about. Although some part of her was wishing for the Godame to ask her mother to gain a more firm grip on her so that she could improve her skills faster, she couldn't also avoid a dark feeling, a sensation of disaster hovering above her head. She sighed and turned to the window once again. There was this feeling in the room she couldn't really explain. She tried to call for one of the nurses, but it was of no avail, as no answer was given to her calls. Sakura got up and reached for the door. She opened the door and saw that she wasn't really in a hospital, but in some kind of underground dungeon. She followed down the corridor searching for something. What she was searching, she couldn't tell, but it felt as something she definitely had to find. She finally reached the end of the corridor, and was now starting to feel something close to dark satisfaction. She opened the gates in front of her and entered a large room. "About time you showed up," said Sasuke. "I was about to start without you." There was no audible answer from her, but it was obvious there was no way in hell she would let him have all the fun alone. "Actually, I'm through with him. He's all yours," the raven-haired boy said before leaving the room. Sakura grabbed the long knife she had with her, making sure it was sharp before turning to the person behind her, immobilized by a large set of chains reinforced with jutsu. "Hello, Naruto." "Goodbye, Naruto," she said before slowly driving the knife through the blonde's chest, slowly, savoring his screams of pain. Sakura rose up from the bed, realizing the screams she was hearing were coming from herself. She felt evil, dirty, and started to try getting of the bed in desperation. The nurses eventually came and found her sitting against the corner of the room, hugging her knees. No matter how much they tried, she would only say a single thing: "I killed him, I killed him." Wind had seen enough. Swirling around the distressed humans on the street one last time, it rose in the air. It sped past the graveyard, reaching the training grounds where an old man was sulking, looking at the darkened sky. This was the man destined to train his chosen, the man who had trained his chosen who had now temporarily disappeared from the surface of the planet. Wind rose in the sky and left on a quest. A quest to greet his chosen, who was just about to come back from the abyss. The green, yellow, and white streams of light flew above his head when Naruto dared to open his eyes for the first time since he had received the Chidori on his chest. The memory was still fresh on his mind, although he didn't really have the slightest idea of what had happened after that. Nor how he was still alive. Naruto looked around, curious. He knew the place he was in, of course. It was his own mindscape, the place where he would usually end up when particularly beaten up and proceed to hear the sarcastic, sadistic comments of Kyubi, the demon fox sealed inside his body. However, this time no remark came from the cage. Because it was simply not there. No sign of the demon fox either. Naruto would start worrying about the fox having succeeded in escaping if he hadn't more pressing matters. No matter where he looked, the large room was being torn apart. As if something was demolishing it. But instead of falling down, the mindscape was actually going up, gradually breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, into an enormous vortex of yellow and white light, as water in a maelstrom, or air in a hurricane. As he looked, he saw bright strands of light reach out from the vortex and grab more of the room, breaking it down. It was a terrifying sight and Naruto had no idea what was going on. He looked around, but the exit he would usually use had already been destroyed. Now it was the ground around him that was starting to collapse. He looked up to the vortex again in desperation, and to his horror, the strands reached out for him. He tried to dodge them, but some, very thin ones, succeeded in attaching themselves to his eyes. What he felt next was indescribable. It was as if his body was being torn apart and put back again millions of times, and at the same time, he could feel his eyes being slowly changed, modified, pulled away, disintegrated. He felt the same thing on his chest and knew it was the end. Then to his surprise it stopped. He could not see what was going on but felt something soft, something hairy brush past him. He could also hear wind gushing as if something enormous was continuously moving around him. Sounds of growls were also present, and Naruto started to wonder what more was in check for him. It was curious, though. Although he was experiencing pain like he had never experienced before, although he had just lost his vision and probably would also lose his life, Naruto felt curious. Curious as to what would happen next. What would lay beyond life? What was death? And so, with a feeling of deep curiosity and childish anticipation, Uzumaki Naruto felt a pull on his body, felt the soft furry thing wrap around him, and dove into the vortex, to the very core of the unknown, to the source of the life stream, protected by something or someone he could not see nor identify. The sound of falling droplets awakened Naruto. It was a soft, rhythmic sound that he would have dismissed easily in the past but now struck him as indefinably beautiful. He opened his eyes to search for the source of that sound. He could not see. No matter how much he tried, he would only get darkness as an answer to his efforts. Why could he not see? What was wrong with his eyes? Naruto started to run around aimlessly, beginning to panic. Because of his careless wandering, he ended up bumping with his head against something hard, falling over, utterly defeated by something as simple as a stone statue. When he came back to his senses, something had changed. He still couldn't see like any normal human being would, but, aside from the darkness, there was a strange, foggish yellow thing wherever he looked. He tried to stretch his hand to grab it, and saw how the fog moved, as if it was water, waving when a rock thrown by a little kid hits it. It moved differently according to how he moved too, and seemed to be concentrating around him. This sure was freaking Naruto out, but after some time, he came to the conclusion that, whatever it was probably harmless, since he didn't feel any after effects from being in contact with it. Still, the similarities it had with the yellow light that had attacked him before was disturbing. Naruto tried to get up only to bump his head against the rocky structure from earlier. Carefully avoiding new contact, he came to his feet, trying to make out as much of the room he was in as possible, considering his debilitated state. If anyone would have been able to see him, they would probably start laughing their heads off by the sight of Uzumaki Naruto hesitantly making his way back and forth in the room, with his hands extended forward, like a blind mole. He kept trying to get a feeling of the place until, dismayed by pure boredom and lack of any palpable results, he returned to what he supposed was the middle of the room and sat down. It was not a well-known fact that Uzumaki Naruto wasn't that comfortable in the dark at all. Memories of his lonely childhood came back with demons, old and new, to haunt him in those situations. And being in a room he did not know, seeing nothing but darkness all around him, a darkness sporting very strange shiny dust particles or whatever that was pretty much freaking him off. It was strange that the fox still hadn't healed his eyes though. That dumb fox, what is he doing? Hey, dumb fox, heal me with your chakra. It could be described, perhaps, as a somewhat irresponsible challenge, the one he was making, considering how much control the demon fox seemed to be getting over him and what concern the chakra it gave to the blonde boy. However, no angry comeback was sent through their link, no surge of malice and chakra. Just plain silence. He also tried to reach the cage, as he had been taught by Jiraiya, but found it nowhere. The demon fox had, for all purposes and effects, disappeared from his mind and body. Figures. The first moment I really could find that fox bastard useful, he leaves, Naruto said aloud. There was an unexpected, extremely bold echo from those words, which went on for quite some time. That much told Naruto that, at least, the room he was in was really big. Perhaps not in radius but, at least, in height. Damn. It looks like I'm all alone. Hours, minutes, seconds, years. All that could have passed, during the time he waited for someone, something that would help him out of the situation he was in. But nothing came, no one answered his needs, and Naruto was bored. He had slept a little, driven by sheer boredom, and passed the rest of the time wandering around. The room was much larger than he had previously anticipated and extended through a great door into a corridor. He had discovered the passage thanks to the shiny dust he could see. Which was, truth to be told, the only thing he could see. He had been sitting in the floor after awakening from the nap when suddenly realized that the dust seemed to be moving. It was so subtle that it had escaped him before, but it was there. The dusty particles were being moved as if a wind was blowing and, carefully following them, he reached a place where there seemed to be a hole in the wall. A quick inspection proved it to be large portals, enormous doors, opened ones too, that led to a large corridor. As soon as Naruto stepped into the corridor he felt wind. Fresh wind blowing softly against his right side, brushing his hair. It seemed that, wherever he was walking in an open space. He reached out with his hands and found low walls at both sides, and Naruto concluded he should be in some sort of bridge in the open or whatever. The dust was much more spread, without really losing its density, which seemed to confirm his assertion of being out in the open space. He kept going, carefully following through the corridor, until he reached another door. He was starting to be able to make out obstacles and buildings out of the way the shiny dust behave. The fact that he had been using his hands and all other sense trying to take out the greatest amount of information possible seemed to be helping too. He was slowly adapting himself to his handicap, making use of the newfound ability, if it could be called one. The door had some kind of pattern that, oddly enough, Naruto could see. And he could see because the dusty particles were concentrating on it, making the lines glow the same way they did. It was an hexagram with circles in each corner. The uppermost of them all held the image of a human being. The downmost the circles of what seemed to Naruto as a tailed beast. The other 4 ones had the kanji for the 4 elements, and in the middle of the hexagram stood a large circle, with an eye in it, with concentric circles for pupils, and with a strange object as the iris. There were lines of writings uniting each circle, forming the hexagram, but Naruto didn't understand nor recognize them. Somewhat puzzled, he pushed the door open. Naruto entered this newfound room and instantly, the perception changed. The whole room glowed brilliantly in golden light, with a great source, ball of energy in the middle. Its features weren't discernible, which wasn't surprising, considering how much he could see, at the moment, but even if he could, he doubted he would be able to actually see something. The patterns of light of the ball were always changing, as if it was made of different rings, each of them turning independently from the others. He stood there, with his mouth open at the object. When he tried to touch it, he discovered he couldn't. Naruto wondered what that ball was. "That is the machine of the world," said a soft, female voice from behind him. Naruto turned back and saw a humanoid figure that shone so brightly in the golden light that it was actually white. It was almost blinding him. The yellow dust swirled around it. "Everything that was, is, and will be is recorded here." Another voice, this time of a male, made itself heard, again from behind Naruto. He turned back again and saw, across the ball, on the other side of the room, another humanoid figure, also shining brightly, with the dust around it. "The machine of the world turns," said the female. "According to the will of beings," completed the male. "But it has become restless," continued the first. "For it is a time of change," finished the second. They, whoever they were, whatever they were approaching Naruto as they spoke, constantly alternating between each other, the female starting the sentences and the male finishing them. Naruto had his eyes open wide, trying to make out the maximum of their intentions. Of course he couldn't see a thing besides the bright light. "You are hurt. The life stream is not kind. Fear not. You will heal." The one Naruto had identified as a female raised a hand to his eyes, while the male raised a hand to his chest. Light really blinded him that time and he felt some pain again, both in the chest and in the eyes, although now was a pain mixed with a ticklish feeling he usually associated with healing injuries. The light extinguished, and all was darkness. He realized he had his eyes closed. Ever so slowly, he tried to open them. The freakish golden dust was there still, but this time it resembled more like liquid than actual solid particles. And he could see. See like he used to. He could finally make out where he was. It appeared to be a very big building, and he was in the center of it, next to a strange structure. The room was made of bright white stones, but above, a dome of black ones could be seen. Each of the stone types seemed to meld with each other in a very harmonious way, beautiful even. In the central structure stood a large ball made out of intricate metal rings, spinning each one on its own direction. If the golden bright wasn't still present, Naruto would have found it very ugly. But it seemed he still could see the strange thing, although more faint. And then there were the beings he had seen before. They had moved while he had been testing his eyes and were now beside each other, as if inviting him for comparison. Honestly, he couldn't see much. There was a white figure, with glowing blue eyes, which definitely had the layout of a female body, being made of round forms and subtle, gentle proportions. The other one was black, with glowing golden eyes, and had the rough build generally associated to a male. It was difficult to make out anything more, for they had no facial features. "Who are you? Where am I?" he asked them. "Where you are, you will know in time. Who we are is for you to find out." Naruto looked at them for a moment. "How do I find that out again?" Live. Ask yourself. The world. Keep your curiosity. And your questions will be answered. But you need to search. But you need to think. For every bit of knowledge comes with a price. What price? Naruto asked, starting to become confused. Effort. Right, he said, unsure. He turned his attention to the sphere behind him, to avoid any more strange conversations regarding him. And the figures were instantly by his side, answering the questions before he actually had time to voice them, answering them before he even had time to think them, the questions he had on a subconscious level and didn't yet understand. The machine of the world. Since the beginning of time we've been here. Yet this one artifact is even older than us. The rings follow the flow. But the flow is uncertain. There is a maelstrom within it. And you lie in the center of it. Your choices will decide the fate of your world. The dark figure leaned towards him and tuffed him with one finger on his forehead, while the white one nudged him gently on the heart. Naruto gasped as a tremendous pull made itself felt, and he fell backwards. The last thing he saw was the rings passing through him, with him going always further towards the middle of the sphere, being engulfed by light, drowning in darkness. Naruto looked around, curious. He knew the place he was in, of course. It was his own mindscape, the place where he would usually end up when particularly beaten up and proceed to hear the sarcastic, sadistic comments of Kyubi, the demon fox sealed inside his body. However, this time no remark came from the cage. Because it was simply not there. Instead of it stood 4 pillars of an unidentified rock, with what seemed like ancient writings and a paper with the kanji for contract placed upon the upper pillar. Inside the rectangle formed by the pillars was what seemed like pale, bright blue glass. Upon closer inspection, however, Naruto noticed it looked more like water than glass. With what seemed like a maelstrom in it, just like the one he had once created with his bunshin in order to provide a safe escape to his team. It looks a lot like the symbol in my jumpsuit, he thought. The surface shimmered and shone like diamonds in a way that was very appealing to Naruto. He tried to remember what he had been doing to get here and why the fox wasn't there. Ah, the Chidori through his heart. Naruto placed his hand on his chest, as if to confirm it was still there. It was that then. He had died. Perhaps that was the way to heaven. This thing looks like a portal. Perhaps it is what's necessary to get to the afterlife. Well, either way, here I go. Naruto reached out with his hand, touching the surface of the liquid with the tip of his finger. It did felt like fresh water in a spring. Distracted by the feeling, he only realized what was happening when the liquid had already reached to his forearm. Surprised and a little scared, he pulled away from the portal with a jerk and observed how the fluid was absorbed by his own skin. Waiting a moment for any noticeable effects, he finally concluded that, whatever it was harmless. Might as well go on with it. Now that I'm going to heaven, maybe I can meet my family. He had no idea why he was talking out loud, but he didn't have anyone else to talk to and, as far as he knew, there was no assurance that he would find someone anytime soon, so he figured he might as well talk with himself. There was a moment of hesitance in the boy's movement before he resolutely took a step towards the surface, disappearing in the plasma only to find himself in the middle of a stone platform that, as far as he could see, was hanging in the air without visible support. Naruto fell on his knees and took a peek from one of the cliff sides. All he could see was sky and clouds under him. Great! Am I supposed to wait here until I grow wings, or is some angel coming to get me? He said sarcastically. I would not expect that, kid, but if you want a ride I could provide it. As he searched for the source of the voice, an enormous head came level with him. Right in front of him, a gigantic fox-like creature, with white fur shining in the sunlight stood, looking intently at his face. As he looked at the creature, he realized two things. First, it was not it who was upside down but rather himself, as he could see the ground up above his head. And two, the animal had various tails, swinging in accordance to one another. Naruto had only seen one animal with multiple tails with a resemblance to a fox, if it could be called an animal. He therefore concluded that the one in front of him was Kyubi, the nine-tailed demon fox. Something seemed a little off, though. The Kyubi he knew was blood red, not white, and spoke with a male voice that reeked of death and malice, almost like a stench that would remain in the air after it had spoken, not with a soft female voice. The only things that remained unaltered were the slid red eyes, the tails, and the feeling of power that was ever present in its voice. He wasn't about to let his guard down because of such technicalities, though. Naruto flexed his legs and went into standby stance, while asking with somewhat suspicious eyes. Who are you? What do you want? What kind of stupid question is that? We're in your mindscape. I'm a fox-like being, and have multiple tails. Who the hell do you think I am? I'm Kyubi, of course. Apparently, the new looks hadn't changed the demon fox's short temper. Cut the crap. My mind is a sewer, and the demon fox I know is blood red in color, and has the most vicious way of looking at me, as if imagining how I would be bloody and messy. He answered promptly. My mindscape is not a fancy field like the one I see above me and below you. It was quite the mystery as how Naruto had been able to keep such wordplay like that, with above and bellows all mixed so, for a moment, there was silence. Kyubi tilted her head to the side as if finding the exchange of words amusing. I got tired of the color and decided to change. As every girl in the world I also have a sweet side and sometimes like to show it. Of course if you keep that up, I'll have to show you my unpleasant side too. And as for your mindscape, I don't really like sewers, this place is much better, thank you. The deadpan answer was sufficient to throw Naruto off his guard. He managed to regain composure in a matter of seconds though. Girl? He asked. His overall posture must have been rather comical because Kyubi started to giggle a little, something that threw him even more off guard and managed to scare him a lot too. What the hell was going on? What's with that face? Do I not look like a girl? And Kyubi made a pose. Now that he thought about it, that was an air of gentleness and a feeling of general girlishness towards Kyubi. Except that would be impossible. Naruto was fairly sure that Kyubi was a male. That's impossible. I'm certain Kyubi was a male, he said. Oh, the fox maid, while blinking, that would be because of my lost tails. But now that I got them back, I'm back to my older self too. The conversation was making no sense to Naruto, but before he actually had the time to go and ask another question, Kyubi said. Why the hell are we having this conversation in this silly way? Come on, grab this. And Kyubi extended a tail towards him. What? Asked Naruto, astonished. Just grab it, come on. And flicked the tail in front of him, tickling his face. Stop that. And he grabbed the tail. Kyubi lifted him from the platform he was standing on and lowered him towards her. About halfway through, Naruto suddenly felt the pull come from the exact opposite direction and found himself upside down, falling towards the ground and Kyubi. It would have been a nasty fall if she didn't catch him with another tail of hers. Apparently, the platform had a gravity of its own that only made itself felt at short distances. To Naruto's great surprise, Kyubi put him on the top of her head. Hey! He made to get Kyubi's attention. What's this crap about lost tails? You're the nine-tails demon fox, there's nothing more to it, and last time I checked you had them all. And what are you doing here? Heaven is for the righteous like me, not for demons like you. This seemed to piss Kyubi off. For the last time, this is your mindscape. And I am not a demon. And my name is not Kyubi, nor are we dead. Naruto blinked. What do you mean, it's not your name? Of course it is your name. And I'm pretty sure I can't live without the heart Sasuke stole from me. Kyubi flicked one of the tails in front of him, in a clear sign for him to grab onto it, and placed him on the ground in front of her. Then she sat down and, straightening her back and assuming a pose of playful importance, she said, Now listen well, 'cause I won't gonna say this again. And she flicked one of her enormous tails, pointing to herself, am not called Kyubi. Of course my name is too complicated for you to say in its original form. Its translation is far too complex. Part of it would be Kitsune, so that's how I am going to introduce myself to you. Kyubi proudly straightened herself even more and continued, locking her eyes with his, I am Kitsune, the goddess of mischief and playfulness, not some petty demon. I was what I was because I had lost 3 of my original tails, rendering me unbalanced, assuming the form of a male, and becoming unstable, and vicious, and malicious, and you know what I mean. An evil, Naruto added. An Evi what? No, I'm not evil, the Kitsune said mortified, it was all because of the lost tails, you see. Without my normal number of them, I become unbalanced. Tails are the tailed beast's heart, if they get to miss, we become corrupted. Oh yeah, and how did you lost them? Naruto retorted. They were not lost. Kyubi answered sadly, they were stolen. Huh? Naruto was becoming confused. He honestly couldn't make out how the hell someone was going to steal one tail from a gigantic fox. Yes, stolen. And by one of your village. You never asked yourselves why I would only attack Konoha most of times? Well, we figured it was one of those crazy demon beast things, you know, Naruto said sarcastically. Deep inside, however, he was astonished with that piece of information. Anyway, what does one stand to gain by stealing you some tails? You really have no idea what our tails are, do you? Well, tails are, like appendices, right? They are used for maintain balance while in movement, that's about it. He concluded. Baka, Kyubi said, a Biju's tails are its soul. And its source of power too. So by stealing my tails, the culprit was able to obtain more power. That doesn't still explain why you're here, Naruto remarked. Kyubi seemed a little pissed by the sudden change in the topic but managed to hide it. After you were killed by that boy, something I definitely was not expecting happened. You entered the life stream. And most surprising of it all, you took me with it. Kyubi started, the life stream is an energy field, of some sort, that is known to be the shortest path to heaven or whatever, and only the pure of heart are able to do it, she said smartly, effectively answering Naruto's question before it left his mouth and therefore keeping him from disrupting her story again. So, it is not surprising that I was dumbstruck for being able to enter too. As much as I tried to deny it, truth was I was not exactly pure of heart at that very moment, nor had I been in the near past. Well, yeah, I suppose killing hundreds of innocents might do that to you, Naruto managed to slip between her speech. Shut up anyway, there's a catch as to entering the life stream. Kyubi explained, you see, the life stream as a sort of defense mechanism. Its job is to cleanse of all impurities the ones that manage to enter it regrettably, that usually means your body. So I, in all my wisdom and goodwill, I decided to protect you, cause, let me tell you, you were getting one hell of a beat up at the time. Now Naruto understood, the fluffy thing he had felt, while on his mindscape before, had been Kyubi protecting him. Of course I suffered a lot of damage myself for that, but I'm pretty tough for a girl, you know. Kyubi seemed to like gloating about her power and endurance, and you really didn't lose a thing in that, since the lifestream interacted with your eyes and body, which allowed me to have a more deep influence in the creation of your bloodline, although that wouldn't have been possible to create such a powerful bloodline without their agreement and intervention, and without being there too, she finished rather thoughtfully. Naruto, on his part, was a turmoil of emotions. He finally exploded, unable to contain himself any longer. A bloodline? He screamed in shock, something that actually felt like a small hurricane to Kyubi's sensitive ears. OHYH. I'm awesome, alright. Brat Kyubi started dangerously slow, shut the hell up. Right. So anyway, what's this bloodline of mine? Although he was no longer shouting his lungs out of his chest, Naruto still felt somewhat at unrest, something that showed in the way he kept jumping from one foot to the other. I don't know. That is something for you to find out. Anyway, after that rough episode, I was rewarded, and most righteously, after all the trouble I went through, with my lost tails. I am once again a complete being, perfect in every way you can imagine. Okay, Naruto thought, so maybe the tails wasn't the only thing that had remained unchanged in Kyubi. Its enormous ego seemed to be faring equally well. Say, Fox, what's this deal about my bloodline ability? What do you mean by having influence in it? And just in which way, pray tell me, can someone steal such an enormous thing as a tail from you? He asked. For the last time, I'm not a fox, I'm a vixen. A girl. Kyubi shouted, exasperated, just how much do you not know about bloodlines, kid? Hey, let's get something straight, vixen, he said awkwardly. It was strange to address Kyubi as a female. 1. Don't call me kid, brat, nor anything like that. I'm 14 now, I'm not a kid anymore. 2. I don't know much since the Hyuga or the Uchiha, and for that matter, all other clans in Konoha, Don't go around distributing pamphlets about how they got their bloodline or how they work. Answers, QB said teasingly. 1. Sure thing, midget. She laughed as Naruto trembled in indignation, and about the clans not going around telling about their bloodlines. Well, this is a dangerous world, and the more secrets an individual has, the more difficult to beat him it is. I don't actually know how we, Bijou, came to be. Although we are not really tailed demons, but rather what you should call deities. As I told you before, I myself am the Kitsune goddess of mischief and playfulness, and as me, all the other Bijou have their particular traits and abilities. Our origins are lost in the realms of time, much like humankind itself. What I know is that, as far as our memory goes, and believe me, we have very good memories, humans and Bijou have formed contracts. These contracts would be good for both parts. The human in question would develop a special ability, and the Bijou would see its life force spread through the world, amplifying its influence. The Bijou would also have the opportunity to absorb some of the knowledge of the human in question, therefore being able to adapt to a changing world. There were other benefits, but you're too young to know about those. She smiled at the indignation his face showed. This is how your Hyuga clan's Byakugan came to be. They made a deal with me and I gave them the bloodline. This is probably either forgotten, or hidden in the most deep and dark basement the Hyuga have in their estate. Kyubi's voice turned darker, almost like as she was the demon once again. But one day a young Hyuga approached me. He said he was there to pay his respects to me. He flattered me and I foolishly fell to his trick. He stole me 3 tails. When a Bijou loses a tail, he or she also becomes more imperfect. The result of me being deprived from my tails was what you saw. I became incomplete, turned into a male, my consciousness failed me and become a rampaging monster. Are you saying we males are incomplete? Naruto asked. Who stole the tails? I never heard anything about it, and I'm pretty sure that, even if I happened to have fallen asleep during that particular history class, I would have paid attention to such a fantastic story. It wasn't something that man would have wanted to be recorded, Naruto. But the power of the tails along with his already present Byakugan gave birth to an entirely different bloodline. The name of this man was Hyuga Madara. Seeing his blank face, Kyubi added he changed his name. He became Uchiha Madara. Naruto blinked before realization hit him. Uchiha. That's Sasuke's family name. You mean to tell me the Sharingan came to be through stealing your tails? Yes, but such a vile act did not go unpunished. You have heard of Manjikyu Sharingan, right? Naruto nodded darkly. Of course he had heard. It was the reason he had died in the first place. Because the power was stolen and not freely given, the contract was corrupted and the bloodline became tainted. The Manjikyu is the epitome of that corruption. The user becomes slowly insane and generally ends up killing him or herself, or getting killed. Once again, such facts usually appear on the males. Kyubi seemed to be enjoying teasing him about his gender. There are 2 ways an Uchiha can gain the Manjikyu: by murdering his best friend, or by sacrificing himself in order to save another life. The second is usually fatal, but it can happen. If you escape alive, the simple fact that you were willing to sacrifice yourself for another would give you the Manjikyu. Then the curse would be lifted and the user would have true access to the powers of the bloodline. Trouble is, I've never heard of anyone actually achieving it. Most of them choose murder and end up mad. I think I know someone who has succeeded in achieving it, Naruto said. At a questioning look from the vixen, he continued, Hatake Kakashi, my sensei, he showed me a Sharingan that is not like the normal ones, with the 3 komas. And since he hasn't murdered his best friend cause he already died, I guess his Sharingan has the full-powered Manjikyu, don't you think? But, Hatake is not a Uchiha branch. How come he has the Sharingan? I dunno, he never told me. The eye seemed to have been implanted there though. Fitting. The only one achieving the true Manjikyu is someone not from the Uchihas. What do you mean true Manjikyu? Isn't the other one a Manjikyu too? Well, yes, but it's a tainted one, so you don't have truly access to the bloodline true power. What power is it? That you'll have to ask your sensei, once we get back. Naruto looked to the portal up above. Right. And how do I get back? Through the same way you came here, of course. But the portal is hanging in the air, I can't reach it. You call yourself a ninja, right? If you don't have the tools, or the abilities, make them. Are you crazy? I can't fly. Why not? Birds can. No matter how much he tried to strain his mind, Naruto just couldn't come up with a good way to reach the portal. He had made various attempts, some very foolish, in order to do it, but they had all failed. He had tried everything, from building artificial wings, an idea that didn't work too well, since he ended up smashed on the ground after the wings broke during the fall. If he hadn't been in his mindscape, the impact might have proven fatal. To a more ninja-like approach, which consisted in having several Kage Bunshin make the Rasengan and therefore create a small hurricane that would throw him to the platform. Problem was, he really didn't have control as to where he was actually thrown, and he decided to quit the idea. Several days had passed since he first stepped through the portal, and Naruto was starting to acknowledge Kyubi as a close friend and someone to be trusted. The vixen had, however, a few odd particularities. She seemed particularly inclined into pranking him. And Naruto, being the consummate prankster, did not like to be pranked and not be able to pay back. There had even been one time when he had been resting atop Kyubi's head, in the middle of her fur, which was almost as high as he was when he stood up. After he returned to the ground, there had been this large thud-like noise behind him. He turned back to Kyubi, only to see this large creature, almost half the size of him, armored and with horrid teeth and the most disgusting mouth he had ever seen. The thing turned towards him, and opened its mouth, revealing a lot of leech-like things in the place of where should be its tongue. At that point in time, Naruto couldn't avoid letting out a horrified scream and tried to form a Rasengan. Something useless, for Kyubi smashed the creature with her paws. "What the hell was that?" he asked. "Oh, this was just a flea. They sometimes get in my fur, you know," Kyubi said casually, "quite the nasty buggers if you asked me. They suck my blood and irritate my skin." And she scratched her back with one of her paws as if to prove her point. "And why didn't you tell me that, for God's sake? I've been on your fur a lot recently. What if I had been caught by one of those?" "Well, I thought maybe you would like to help me get rid of them," she said, looking to him. She kept looking to his horrified face, until she broke up, not being able to keep the laughter back. "Mwahahaha. Oh man, you're just too good to be true, ah. You should see the look on your face." The smashed thing vanished in a puff of smoke right in front of Naruto's eyes. Obviously, it had been an illusion of some sorts, but Naruto had never been very good at spotting such things. "I've never had this much fun since hell. I don't even remember." "Ah! You tricked me," Naruto said dangerously before exploding. "What the hell? I'll get you for this one, you idiot." "Wahahaha." Naruto looked at the clouds, running on the sky above him. He had been laying on the ground for quite some time now, watching the sun setting and the platform with the portal standing there, above him, teasingly. He reached out with his arm and closed his fist, as if to grab the hovering platform. He couldn't reach it. Not yet. Something was amiss. He had failed to understand something important. Never before in his entire life had Uzumaki Naruto felt like that. It was a new emotion, a feeling of seriousness and desire for understanding that had not been present before. There were so many questions he wanted to see answered. So many doubts troubling his mind. If this was his mindscape, if this was part of him, then why couldn't he reach for the exit? Why was it where it was, in the first place? And where the hell was Kyubi? Kyubi. She had told him something about having changed that particular spot, if it could be called that, of his mindscape. If so, did she have something to do with the location of the portal? And if she had, why did she place it in such an unconceivable place? And then there was the matter of what was happening outside his mindscape. Kyubi had said he hadn't died. Then what had happened while he entered the life stream? No matter how much he struggled, Naruto couldn't remember anything from after being sucked into the vortex of light. There was something there, of that he was sure, but he was unable to grasp it. A flicker of light in the corner of his eye, surrounded by darkness, that disappeared as soon as he tried to look straight at him. The daylight had diminished significantly now, and stars had started to appear in the sky. Every now and then, as minutes passed, a small falling star would be seen in different spots of his field of vision. Naruto kept looking at them, while a soft breeze nudged him. He had never been one to spend time looking at the stars, and only now he realized what he had missed. There was something soothing in them. Looking at the heavens made him calmer and more apt for contemplative tasks, such as the one he was in now. How did the stars in his mindscape become so very well represented? His knowledge of their position in the sky was pretty close to nothing, and yet he couldn't help but feel they were in their right place in there. Had it been Kyubi the one to place them like that? And if not, then how? How did he automatically know where to place stars in the sky if he never had bothered to look at them attentively before? Now that he thought about it, how did a human mind work? He could enter his own mindscape. Could others do the same? He had heard Ino scream something about Sakura having 2 minds on the Chunin exam. Was that something he was supposed to have too? Or was it a particular trait of Sakura-chan? Of course he had 2 minds in him, but he was almost sure Ino wasn't referring to a situation like the one he was in. As far as he knew, he was the only Jinchuriki in the leaf, and he was fairly certain there were no others besides him. He couldn't help but wonder. The situation there was starting to feel more and more like when he and his teammates had taken the belt test. There was something he was supposed to understand, but what? A ninja must read beneath the underneath. The words of his Jounin sensei rang in his ears even though no one was there to talk to him. Was this a test Kyuubi had made for him? If so, what was he supposed to accomplish? Naruto sighed, tired. He was not used to have his mind so filled with unanswered questions. He used to accept things as they came, but apparently that time was over. A loud rumble told him that Kyuubi was coming. The tremors she produced while jumping from cliffs to cliffs and while running could only be compared to her oversized ego. Although, Naruto noted, she had never used such ego to downgrade him, like she had done when she was still incomplete. There was some things he still didn't understand about that story, but such things could wait. The important now was to confront Kyuubi and figure out how to return to the living world. There was a crash all around him when Kyuubi landed, maintaining his body right above his. Naruto stood unaffected. You're no fun, anymore, the giant vixen said. It wasn't a matter of being or not being fun, Naruto thought. She had done it so many times in the past days that he had already grown used to it. He wasn't about to tell her that, anyway. She might get creative again, and then he would have to watch his back more often until he figured out her new trick or prank. Kyuubi, you said you changed my mindscape to your liking, right? He asked, serious. Yes. Short, direct answer. Just like Kyuubi. Then pray tell me, he said, assuming a meditating pose and talking in a slow, wondering voice, why did you put the exit that far up? He finished, looking at her dead in the eyes. The vixen goddess looked at him, as if trying to decide whether or not to answer the question. I had wondered, she said, looking intently at him. I wondered how long it would take for you to figure that one out. You are correct, she admitted. It was I who placed the exit in the sky, so that you would find it harder to reach it. Naruto just looked at her silently, waiting for her to continue. There are two ways to get out of here. Either you asked me to carry you up there, situation in which this will be our last time speaking to each other, or you can work your ass off, find a way to exit this portion of your mindscape on your own, and prove me that you are ready, fit, and otherwise worth of being taught and helped by me. What? He asked. I understand the whole concept of training and have to prove myself, but why do this now? Why here and not in the real world? Granted, there's only so much you can do here in your mindscape, and your body won't evolve and get stronger like in the real world. However, you'll be facing that harsh world as soon as you wake up, and you need to be at least mentally, if not physically, prepared. I don't understand. What's all of this about being prepared? Harsh world? I've been living in that harsh world for 15 years, most of it alone. How am I not prepared? He asked incredulously. Yes, it is true that you have managed to survive for 15 years in the real world. And look where that led you. To a backstabbing from your supposed best friend, Kyuubi said, a little acidly. It wasn't a backstab, it was a full frontal attack, Naruto said, getting edgy at the topic. The huge goddess looked at him for a moment, before proceeding more calmly. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about, she said softly. Backstabbing doesn't necessarily mean you were attacked from behind. It means you were betrayed, eluded by someone who was supposed to be an ally and yet wanted nothing more than use you to his or her own profit. Sasuke didn't betray me. I agreed to being killed, and he promised he would go back to Konoha. He promised he would go back to Sakura-chan. Naruto snapped, angrily. Do you really believe that? The question hung in the air for quite some time until Naruto finally answered, bowing his head pathetically, no. Naruto, it is very well that you are trusting, high-spirited and all that. But there is a difference between being pure, pursuing one's goals and believing in the good in all people's heart, and being blind by an innocence that does you no good, by a recklessness that gives you no advantage, and bound by foolish desires of getting recognition from every single person you know. What I'm trying to say, Naruto, Kyuubi said, reinforcing her point of view, is that you need not to stop being who you are in order to succeed. I'm only asking you to polish some rough edges of your personality. I'm asking you to stop being a child and grow up to become the adult everyone will end up looking up to, without losing the humanity all children possess. That is the truly beautiful and recognizable way of becoming a man, and the most assured path to the Hokage seat you have desired for so long. Naruto sat for a moment, looking down. So, he started, lifting his head slightly, to look at her dead in the eyes. What are you waiting for? There was a glint in his eyes, determination and purpose, as if nothing in the world could stop him then, almost emitting an aura that could have stood up with the Kyuubi's own one. Raise me. There is this thing about humans. As long as a human has the will to live, the will to improve, he will overcome any difficulty that comes his way. Some people would classify this quality as being stubborn, or the inability to know when to quit, to keep one's mouth shut. A few moments after his speech, Uzumaki Naruto was already regretting the words that had left his mouth. Kyuubi's method of raising him into the adult he ought to be was not harsh. It was brutal, a total torture. From the psychological point of view at least. Physical hardships were nothing new to Naruto. He was used to them, it was part of being a ninja. However, he had never fared well against psychological attacks. He got angry easily, he confused himself even more easily. But this was breaking him down. The Kitsune goddess had made some strange jutsu, at least in his understanding of the situation. Her tails seemed to flicker above them for a moment before encasing them in a sphere. From that point on, Naruto was forced to face all his previous hardships, being pointed every failure he had made, not in a sympathetic way, but rather in a ruthless one that was purposefully made in order to test his mental strength to the limit, although he did not know that. The hardest one to bear and surpass was, undoubtedly, the events that had occurred during and after confronting Orochimaru, the fight with Sasuke, his defeat. Kyuubi looked down at the boy in front of her paws as he grumbled in his sleep and woke up. He sat and looked at her, after analyzing their surroundings for some moments. That was one hell of a beat-up, he said in ill humor. Well? Did I pass? The vixen tilted her head to the side before answering, for the moment. What I have in store for you next, though, is not something you can learn or do here, so I'm taking you to the gate as soon as you feel prepared. You figures, he said, the only time you offer help to me for reach the portal is when I can't barely move. Well, do it tomorrow, I'm tired. So tired I don't think I will be able to sleep. What was that, by the way? It was a sort of a genjutsu. If you must know, it is used to make a person revive past events of his or her life, even though one can't willingly recall. It can be used to treat psychological problems, to help analyzing past events to correct one's mistakes, or for torture. That was torture, all right, Naruto commented. He then fell quiet for a moment, before suddenly raising his head to Kyuubi, asking, say, Tsukuyomi wouldn't happen to be a perversion of that jutsu, would it? As a matter of fact, it is. I'm glad to see you use that head of yours for more than just knocking out Shikaku's vessels. There was the vixen with her sarcasm again, Naruto thought. Teach me how to counter it, he asked. The kitsune looked at him and hesitated a little, before replying, you aren't ready yet. When the time comes I will help you, but not now. Fine. You're lucky I'm so devastated, or else you would have a hard time making me let this one go, vixen. The giant kitsune looked down at the boy while he closed his eyes for a moment and rested. He had withstood that pretty well indeed. Any ordinary human would probably break down, and not be able to do more than crying their hearts out, let alone make half-hearted threats to a goddess. But then again, Uzumaki Naruto was no ordinary man. Yo, Kyuubi? HRMMM? How did you appear? What? Didn't I tell you that I protected you from the stream and then… No, not that, Naruto interrupted. How did you appear in this world? Was there some mother goddess you were daughter of, or what? I do not know. I'm sure I've already said this to you. You humans used to have quite some legends about how I came to be, but me myself I don't have a clue. Oh. What kind of stories? Naruto asked, interested. They're not worth telling, frankly. They're nothing interesting. Naruto could feel there was something else going on, so he pressed a little more. Come on, tell me. No. It was an authentic bark from Kyuubi's part, and although it was probably meant to be threatening, it sounded so funny to Naruto that he couldn't help but roll over on the floor, laughing. You are Kyuubi seemed to be having difficulty in finding the right word to express her feelings. You are so troublesome. Wahahaha. You sound just like Shikamaru. Ahahaha. Naruto laughed. He then fell into an awkward silence, before saying, oh, yeah, I'll have to start working if I want to go back before they bury me. I wouldn't worry about that. When one enters the life stream, the body simply disappears, engulfed by the flow. They don't have a body to bury to begin with. What? But then they think I'm dead. Worse than that, I don't have a body to return to. Fool. Listen to what you're saying, will ya? Without a body, how could you be here in your mindscape? Kyuubi asked, lazily cleaning one of her paws. The body cannot live without the mind, but the reverse is also true in most cases, anyway. But I agree with you. It's about time you start thinking about getting out of here. Great. But you put that up there, how am I supposed to reach it? Naruto asked, sighing. I wish I could fly. Baka. This is your mindscape. Even here, inside the contract boundaries, you are in command. I cannot force you to do anything here, nor can I impose my will. You can change everything if you want, although I rather enjoy the view. Change? He asked. Change. Naruto looked at her for a few seconds before inspecting the surrounding area. Something that had always been disturbing in that place was the fact that nothing seemed to obey to the laws of the real world. Rock formations would assume the strangest shape, making loops around themselves and such. The clouds would be strange too, both in shape and colors. Naruto was starting to finally understand. The place wasn't subject to the laws of the universe because it was not directly connected to reality. There, everything was potentially possible, and since this was his mind, he was starting to have the feeling it all depended on his imagination. Naruto concentrated real hard in just trying to move the ground in front of him a few inches up. In front of him, he heard some rough sounds and opened his eyes to see that a small portion of the ground had been lifted from its original place. It was like growing plants, but Naruto could tell it was a tiring activity. Kyuubi looked at the small piece of rock and said mockingly, "What? I knew you were bad, but I never thought you were this bad. You really beat up everyone's expectations. Too bad it's for the worst." Heh heh huh? The kitsune suddenly stopped laughing when she noticed the huge smirk on the boy's face. Almost at the same time, she felt a pressure on her bum, when a huge rock hand rocketed from the ground and gave her a twist on that place. She blushed so much Naruto was sure he could see the colors even through her fur. "You damn idiot, you're gonna pay for that. Come here right now." She started attacking him with her tails and paws, trying to give him a beating, forcing Naruto to resort to his most finely tuned escape techniques, earned through years of pranking and running away from the targets. Her screeches of rage and embarrassment continued to echo through the place. Naruto never thought there would be echo in a mindscape. He continued to dodge her attacks until he finally seized the right opportunity, and, landing on one of her swinging tails, used the added momentum to leap through the air into the portal platform. The vixen stood down below, or above him for that matter, since she had risen the platform higher to make it more difficult for him to reach it. "Now, what do you say to that?" he screamed to her. "If this is not using my head, then I don't know what it is." The goddess just looked at him for a moment, still somewhat reddish on the cheeks, if an animal could be said to have such things, before starting to laugh. "Well, go on, you earned it." Naruto made his way to the portal, but before stepping through, he turned back to the vixen and asked, "Kyuubi, is there any way to take you out of here? You know, like a summoning so that you can get some fresh air?" "Sure, if you're allowing to take the risk." She smirked. "Just do as you would do a normal summoning. I'll explain later. Right now all you have to know is that you are in a situation that provides you a sort of a contract to me." Naruto nodded, saying, "Okay. See ya soon, Baka Vixen." He smirked and leaped through the gate before she had time to throw him her answer to the insult. His body felt cold. He couldn't see a thing, all was darkness. He felt like he was floating, but his body seemed way too heavy for that. He couldn't even move his fingers, let alone his arms and legs. He tried to open his eyes. A bright light made itself visible, a bright light that subdued into a golden glow. There were silhouettes behind, or in the glow, but he couldn't make out the details. He chose to close them again because they were hurting like hell. Daddy, see him? I told you there was someone here." Naruto was sure he had heard someone. But he was too weak to move, too weak to even try and see who or what it was. The last thing he managed to do before passing out was seeing a distorted face of a strange man before he passed out. The voices were starting to annoy him. Good moods were never his forte. A/N. This is a Latin word sometimes used in other languages such as English. It means strong or strength, meaning in this context that good moods were not one of Naruto's strengths. You might be seeing some more of these in the future. After all, my main language is a Latin one. I'm Portuguese, in the mornings. He despised noises in the morning. The loud ones deafened him, and the small ones presented a titanic torture for his sleepy brain. He decided to teach some manners into whoever was talking while he was trying to sleep. But all he could do was to grunt some sounds as he half opened his eyes. "Oh look! Daddy, I think he's waking up, look!" It was a child's voice. "Don't shout, girl, you'll wake up the poor fellow," a deep voice said. Naruto looked around him. He was laid on what seemed to be a bed made of straws. Above him, he could see the adorned ceiling, made of dark polished wood. He did not recognize the wood, though. Turning to his left he saw a wall. A white time-darkened wall. Turning to his right he saw a face. A very dark face. A few centimeters away from his nose. He made a sudden attempt to move away, only to feel a big hand on his shoulder and to hear the deep voice again saying, "Calm down, son, all is well. We mean you no harm." Turning to the source of the voice, he saw a man with a painted body. The body was painted in a dark brown color, and he had some adorns on his face, around his eyes, in his ears. A very powerful man, judging from his bulk. "Where am I?" he asked. "In the house of John Silvertongue, in the coast of Osterland, in the village of Berasil. I'm the chief of this village. The man called Johns answered. My daughter here found you on the shore to the south, lying unconscious in the sand." He pointed to the little girl Naruto had first seen. "You've been asleep for almost 2 weeks. I was starting to wonder if you were really a man and not some kind of strange plant. He smirked. Naruto was starting to notice that something was not quite right. But he couldn't seem to be able to tell what, so he asked, more to keep a conversation than anything else, "Why are you painted?" What? The man seemed surprised by his question. Naruto noticed that he had a strange accent in the way he talked. Your body is all covered with dark brown ink. Naruto felt his throat dry and was having some difficulty in voicing his thoughts. The man started laughing loudly. It took some time before he was able to talk normally, and even then he seemed to be trying to suppress laughter. Hey, you're funny. This is my natural skin color, young man. In our continent, most people have darkened skin. You would have too if you lived under this frying heat as well. We do have some people with white skin like you, although not in our village. I'm sorry, Naruto said, and I don't mean to be rude nor anything, but can I have some water? Sure. Juans answered before turning to his daughter Sarah. Go fetch some water for our friend. He looked questioningly to Naruto. The name is Naruto, he answered. Right. Go fetch some water to Naruto, will you? The little girl nodded and ran towards the exit of the room. Moments later, Naruto heard the sound of a door closing and the footsteps outside the door. He was starting to notice what was off in that place. Wherever he looked, what seemed to be like faint, almost invisible, streams of yellowish light were wavering in front of him. In all directions possible. He also started to notice that the streams seemed to shift accordingly to his and other people's movements. It was almost like an echo of those movements. Like steam in the wind. Noticing the curious look the man was giving him, Naruto decided to pursue the conversation to avoid embarrassing questions. Look, I'm sorry I said that about your skin. I've never seen someone with that skin color, it's just weird, he said in a low voice. He didn't want to antagonize the ones who had apparently saved him. I'm sorry, he quickly asked again. Oh, don't worry, replied the man. You look strange too. My daughter looks strange. We all look strange because we all are different from each other. And yet we carry uncanny resemblances among us, so different yet so alike. It's what makes the world beautiful. If you ever looked yourself in the mirror, you would know what I mean. Unconsciously, Naruto rose his hands to his cheeks. Tell me about it, he whispered. The man seemed to understand the gesture. Yes, that marks on your face are part of the deal. It makes you look like an animal, if you forgive me. Not that is a bad thing. Might show a close relationship with nature, but I would say your eyes complement it too. What do you mean? Naruto asked. You must have seen people with blue eyes before, right? Well, yes, but they were rather common, much unlike your. Perhaps it's better if you see for yourself. Wait here a moment. The man got up from the floor where he had been sitting and walked out of the room. Naruto took the opportunity to flick his hand several times in front of him. The strange streams moved accordingly. He suspected that it had something to do with the strange land he was on. Juans returned after a little bit carrying a handheld mirror. He handed it to Naruto and looked expectantly to him. Well, go on. Naruto looked at his own reflection without understanding. All was as it used to be. With a start he noticed that his eyes were slightly different. They were still blue, but instead of being homogeneous they were divided into two different shades, one of a darker blue and another of a lighter tone, A/N, much like the yin-yang, just blue and without the dots. He handed the mirror back, dumbfounded, the words of Kyubi echoing on his head, which allowed me to have a more deep influence in the creation of your bloodline. Could this be the manifestation of my bloodline ability? He wondered. Naruto was starting to feel a little excited with the prospect of developing and testing his newfound power, but couldn't help but feel a little disappointed too. He could not see any use for his Kekkai Genkai. Suddenly realizing that Johns was still there, he said, I suppose you're right. I should have realized sooner about what you were talking about. He didn't want to elaborate further, as he couldn't find a good excuse for his eye's appearance. He didn't feel about explaining his bloodline to a complete stranger after Kyubi's remarks on the subject. Don't worry about it, the man answered. I suppose that you were quite disoriented after being unconscious for so long. It is only natural to not remember such petty things as one's appearance. Right, Naruto agreed, glad that the man was not pursuing the subject. Suddenly there was a sound of a door opening and closing, and then Sarah was in the room with a full jar of water. Naruto drank it eagerly. It was fresh, it was delicious. He felt like he had been without drinking for many days. Which, he realized, had indeed happened. Finally satisfied, he sighed, contented. He then asked, I'm sorry? I don't mean to sound like I'm not grateful for your cares nor anything, but I really would like to be able to go home. Can you tell me exactly where am I? I've never heard of this country before, so I guess I really am lost. Johns looked like he was thinking about something. Where are you from, kid? He asked. Naruto made a face. He didn't like being called a kid. He was 14, god damn it, he was a ninja. I'm from Fire Country, more specifically from Konoha, the hidden village in the leaves. He answered foolishly. It was not until he had talked that he realized that it was a bit too dangerous to proclaim his allegiance to Konoha openly in an unknown country. He didn't know whether those people were friends, foes, or either. Apparently it was the latter, since the man merely stated you're from Fire Country, huh? That might be complicated. He turned to him. You see, Naruto, we here in Berasil have no open relationship with Konoha at all. After all, we are in another continent. Also, you are on the farthest shore of this continent, and you need to get to the other side in order to reach the city of Argentia. If I remember correctly, there is a port there which ships regularly to the Wave Country. From there you must be able to reach Fire Country. You know an awful lot of geography, Mr. Naruto stated, awed. I was once a traveler myself. Unfortunately, I cannot leave my village, so I'm afraid you'll have to travel your path alone. We are a small community, he added apologetically, and cannot spare you any of our members. Here in Berasil we need everyone to survive. Life is hard. Don't worry, I'm though, Naruto answered. He got up and said, well then, mister, all I ask you is to point me the direction and I'll follow right away. Johns just laughed. Hold on. You won't want to cross the desert without eating and drinking properly before, now won't you? A growl from Naruto's stomach gave all the answer needed. Also, you might want to put something on before you go on in your adventure, boy, he smirked. Naruto looked down and felt himself go red. It was a good thing the little girl had left the room. When he got up he was totally naked. Don't worry, Johns remarked, we'll get you something suitable for your journey. But first, just put on these light clothes and come with me. I'll give you something to eat. He pointed at a chair with some clothes on it. Naruto nodded and proceeded to dress himself, before following Johns out of the room. Naruto had never seen such a strange meal. He must have awakened around dinner time because, as soon as he made out of the room, he started smelling food being cooked. Nothing would have prepared him for what he saw, though. The whole village appeared to have gathered at its leader's house and was occupied in preparing what looked like a banquet. Whenever the villagers realized he was there, they would take a quick look at him, bow their heads slightly and follow their way. Johns guided him outside the house. Walking alongside with him in the street, Naruto realized he had made a mistake evaluating the situation. The villagers wasn't cooking in the chief's house, they were cooking all over the place. It struck him as strange that so many people would make such festivities only because he was awake. He decided to voice his thoughts to Johns. You were found on the shores of the great ocean, Naruto. We believe that that ocean is the gate for rebirth. You were reborn as a new person, Naruto, and yet you're still the same. We're rejoicing not only you being well once again but also the event of rebirth itself. You must have seen remarkable things in your journey, the man stated. Naruto didn't reply. He didn't really remember a thing from his journey, and, now that he thought about it, how the hell had he got from the place where he battled with the bastard to a continent on the other side of the world? Why do you call it Great Ocean? He asked. The Great Ocean, Naruto. Johns answered, it is called like that because he is very large. Some of us believe it ends in the very road to afterlife. It is a road with only one way, very few have come back, and none in our lifetime. Excluding you, of course. That's also why we're celebrating. Right, Naruto hesitated. His first thought was that the people on this village were slightly insane. A road to afterlife? But then he remembered his own thoughts on his mindscape, and given his past experiences, the idea didn't sound that bad at all. After all, he was sure he had died. What better way to explain his presence in the living world than the one being given to him? He couldn't think of any, and besides, the idea was rather appealing. Where are we going? To the festivities clearing. You can have your dinner there. John smiled. Cool. While walking towards the feast site, Naruto had the opportunity to get a real look at the village he was in. Really, it wasn't an outstanding village. The houses had, however, a strange bulky look to them, and were made of a material Naruto couldn't correctly identify. It certainly wasn't a regular one. The village also seemed to be missing the tall buildings that were inherent to ninja villages. Although such aspect came as no surprise to Naruto, he already had guessed that this was no ninja village. Here and there, he could see ruins of other buildings, and far away, on where he supposed would be the village's gates, enormous walls protecting the perimeter. When asked about the ruins, Johns answered, this was once a proud and wealthy city. A trading center, the last bastion of civilization before the Great Ocean. These used to be enormous buildings that stretched up until they almost touched the skies. But then, the great disaster came, and all but the smallest buildings, protected by the taller ones, were able to withstand the destruction, he said with a sad look on his face. What happened? Asked Naruto, eyes wide. We don't know. After the accident, if it was one, the city got more and more deserted. There just weren't conditions for people to live well here. The only ones who stayed were the ones for whom this place was truly their home, their treasure. But of course the traders couldn't stay in a place where there was no business and left. And with them left the wealth of the city. The people you see here today, Naruto, are the descendants of those who stayed. Life is harsh here. This is the only village in this side of the continent, and are separated from the others by the great Tsunade Desert, and then by the Jaw. Only after it can you reach the closest port village of Argentia. That is, of course, if you take the small road. If you try to cross the continent in all its length, you've got a lot to walk. Jaw? Asked Naruto without understanding. It's what we call to the great chain of mountains that surrounds the eastern part of the Tsunade Desert. Quite interesting rock formations if you asked me. Why? Well, you'll see when you get there, if you get there, that is. Naruto looked to see if the man was kidding with him, but Johns had the most serious look on his face as he watched the horizon. His journey didn't seem to be easy at all. Naruto had felt some reluctance into taking the first bites. The food before him was cooked in a way he had never seen before. The meat given to him was cooked in a spicy, exquisite sauce but had pieces of fruit to complement. Once he took the first bite, however, all the reluctance disappeared to give place to a ravishing appetite that destroyed meals like a hurricane destroyed straw houses. Although they tried, most of the attendants to the banquet failed miserably at hiding the astonishment they felt as Naruto demolished bowls after bowls, dishes after dishes. Many of them, though, showed amusement. Johns, who had been sitting beside him, offered him a drink he had never seen before. When they told him it was an alcoholic beverage, he tried to refuse, but, as they assured him its alcohol gradient was small, he ventured a small sip. It was indeed delicious, and he was soon asking for more. The night progressed pleasantly, with the entire village gathered around the round table, laughing, dancing and talking, a large bonfire lit in the middle. Naruto had been asked various times to recount the events that had led him to drift in the great ocean. At first he had been rather awkward and reluctant, but the strange drink released his tongue, so he ended up telling them the story of his life. He did, however, have the care to left the matters concerning Kyuubi outside the talk, but couldn't help but feel some discomfort under the dense scrutiny an old woman was giving him. This particular woman was very adorned and covered with necklaces and the like. The old lady wore a dark kimono-like dress, with markings that reminded him oddly of some statues he had seen at the Temple of Fire back when he was still on his land. She also had dark skin as everyone else in the village, and Naruto remembered they didn't have anyone with light color skin in the place. Her hair had an almost silvery glow, and the facial hair along with the big eyebrows reminded him vividly of Rock Lee. Her skin fell in elegant waves towards her neck, which contributed to give her a sagely look, someone who was worthy of praise and respect. The woman didn't seem to be able to walk on her own, seeing how she was being carried by 4 younger women. She eventually gave orders to take her away, although she did it in a language Naruto didn't understand, and he relaxed, relieved that he had escaped those odd looks. Seeing his curiosity, John said, "That's the village's seer. She sees the future and other important things." "For real?" he asked. The man nodded. Naruto turned to see the old woman again, but she had already disappeared in the middle of the crowd. Naruto resumed his tale, pleased to have people who seemed to be willing to pass the time with him, even if it was because of something he knew almost nothing about. It was a feeling he had only started to get late in his life, and still a new one at that. One by one, people started to head towards their houses. Naruto was feeling quite sleepy by then but tried to hide it. His pride didn't seem to let him sleep when he had almost promised to leave that day. Fortunately for him, Johns didn't seem to think it was a good time to depart the village, because he turned towards him and said, "Naruto, I know you are eager to get home, but perhaps it's a good idea to get some sleep before going, don't you think? And we would like to prepare you some clothing for the journey, and that will take at least a week. Are you willing to wait?" he asked. Naruto could only nod before following the man to his house. He crashed on the bed and got up early the next morning, at around 2 in the afternoon. The wind blew softly, the waves gently nudging the sand on the beach, as Naruto sat on the shore, watching the crescent moon rise in the night sky. The stars were different there. He could not recognize any of the representations the Sandaime had once shown him on a book. "It appears we have to stay here longer than expected, The voice of Kyuubi, the vixen goddess of mischief, arrived to his ears just a little sooner than it took for her body to come into his field of view. "Apparently," Naruto answered, lying on his back, looking at the starry sky, while the vixen made herself comfortable, with her head against his belly. It was usually the opposite. Kyuubi would normally be much larger than she was now, when he summoned her, and it would be the kitsune who served as a pillow to him. But this was fine too. "John seems to think that I need some clothes. More proper ones to cross the desert." Naruto furrowed his brows, trying to concentrate. He had something important to ask her, he just couldn't remember what. Well, he does have a point. You know, crossing a desert is no small task. I already crossed a desert more than once, he answered. Kyubi turned her head towards him. Crossing Tsunade's desert doesn't count, as you were accompanied by teammates, and only crossed the border line of it. Believe me, crossing a desert is not for pussies. Naruto chose to not answer her statement. He honestly couldn't be bothered at the moment, and truth to be told, he didn't think he could win the argument once it had started. The sky was unusually starry there. He supposed it had to be with the fact that there was no real big light source for many kilometers around them. The beach they were laying in had been suggested to him by the village's leader, Johns, when asked about some place where Naruto could train without risking being seen and therefore have his village's secret techniques being copied. The beach was located between high cliffs and was almost impossible for anyone without ninja skills to reach it. A perfect place to train unnoticed, indeed. Truth to be told, Naruto couldn't care less about his village's secret techniques. It wasn't as if he had any real big secret technique to reveal, anyway. But the isolated place provided the perfect place for him to summon and spend time with the kitsune. You know, you really should accept the offering they made you. Johns had come earlier that day with the proposal of training him and better preparing him for the continent crossing. Naruto had been touched for his concern, but on the other hand, he really wanted to go home. Not wanting to sound rude or anything, he carefully answered he would think on the offer. It's not that I don't want to stay here. Quite on the contrary, I feel quite well in Berasil. At least here people don't treat me like trash. He shrugged off the apologetic glance Kyubi shot him. But, like it or not, Konoha is my home. All of my life is there. My memories, my sadness, the few happy moments I had. Stop with that face. Kyubi jumped a little before soothing her features from the painful guilt that washed through her. You're not to blame, from what you've told me. And my friends, and the people I could have considered family are there too. That's my place, he finished. I really understand what you're trying to say, believe me, I do. But wouldn't it be better to train and get stronger, and actually arrive there safe and sound, than taking unnecessary risks and risk not making through it all? Would your friends prefer to see you alive and well, or having their fears and suspicions of your death, as I'm sure they are having, after you disappeared, confirmed? The vixen asked. Naruto stayed silent, pondering what he had just heard. Then he spoke his mind. But wouldn't take longer make them even more sure of my death? That may be so, but in that case, their suspicions will be just that, suspicions. But if you truly die, then they would become certainty. And to die alone, away from your friends, is not a good way to die. There is also the matter of Akatsuki. This made Naruto raise his eyebrows in surprise. He didn't know she knew about them, but then again, he shared a body with her, so he supposed that was expected. If you don't appear outright, the rumors of the Uchiha killing you will start to spread, and they will cease to look for you. After all, he did pierce your chest and ripped away your heart. Besides, don't forget you promised me to train and grow up. I promised to help you, but there's only so much I can do, if you're not willing. Yep, he was right, alright. No way he would be able to win in an argument against her. And he had to admit her reasoning made sense. His blood was still rushing fast through him from when he heard her talk about Sasuke, but he tried not to think about it. He was no simpleton, especially now, and he knew it was likely that the last Uchiha hadn't returned home. With a pang, he realized he might have even attempted to hurt Sakura. He had been a real idiot to think his death would accomplish anything. He shook his head slightly, chasing the line of thought away. He wouldn't judge anyone without knowing all the facts. That's what the villagers had done to him. He wouldn't sink so low. But Kyubi was right, he needed preparation. In the name of the fourth Hokage, I knew I couldn't outsmart you in a discussion, he said. Kyubi actually looked surprised at his choice of words. Alright, I'll accept the training and take my time. But you have to train me too, alright? The tailed kitsune nodded. We can start right now, if you want. Awesome, he said with a smile and an expression that, if Sakura or any other girl from the Leaf had been there, would have been left dazzled for the rest of the night. So what are you teaching me? Some cool jutsu? Kick-ass taijutsu? First I'll line up a schedule for you, then we'll see, she answered. Ninjutsu is all very well, but there's something you have to have in order to make it useful. She continued, rising from his belly and starting to pace back and forth in front of him. To his credit, Naruto sat straight and actually looked as if he was paying attention. You must learn to think. To control your emotions and learn to act correctly according to the situation you're in. On a dangerous world, the trick is not so much as avoiding dangerous situations. It's to plan things through and reduce that danger to a minimum. You need peace of spirit, you need accuracy of thought, and for that goal I'm teaching you how to meditate. She finished. Naruto blinked. What? Kyubi sighed as she explained, meditation allows you to reach a state of mind where it is easier to perceive what's happening around you. If you master such ability, you will be able to make accurate assessments of the situation around you while in battle in the blink of an eye. to plan your way to victory, to actually ensure everyone you love will make it back home on a mission. It seemed to Kyubi that, with her last remark, she had hit full on the right spot, for Naruto didn't raise any complaints to that, and seemed now eager to get started. There was a seriousness in him that hinted to her that he would not relax until he had mastered every way of the technique. The vixen made Naruto pass through a set of exercises in order to achieve the desired state. He had to relax all his muscles, ease his breathing, control it until it was stable, calm and profound, long and firm. He was sitting in a lotus stance, his arms and hands alongside the lines of his body. Eyes closed, listening to his newfound sensei. Her voice was intoxicating. "I want you to try and listen. Listen to the world around you," came the whisper to his left. He knew she was there as well, doing the same exercise. He breathed and listened. To the song of the waves on the shore. He breathed and listened. To the smallest pebbles, rolling with the water and the sand. He breathed and suddenly he was there. In a place made of light. Golden shimmers all around him. He could not move, he couldn't turn an inch. But he could feel Kyubi, sitting next to him, feel her movements, her chest moving with her breathing, the occasional flick of a tail. The waves on the beach, the trees up above on the cliff behind him, moving with the wind. All of that sent waves of information towards him, a disturbance in the shimmering light, much like the flow of water. It was marvelous. With a gasp he opened his eyes. He was breathing rapidly, as if he had just run a good amount of time at full speed. The sensation he had felt was incredible. And it had brought a memory of something. It shimmered faintly on the back of his mind, but he couldn't quite grasp it. "So? What did you feel?" Kyubi asked. He looked at her, and had to blink. He could have sworn that, while he had been in trance, he had sensed her. But now that he thought about it, he had sensed her in human form. Or humanoid at least. He was sure it had been Kyubi. But now as he looked at her, she was just the same vixen as always, sitting like a big dog, next to him. He pushed the troublesome feeling aside and started to explain everything to her, in excited whispers. He couldn't understand why he was doing it. But Kyubi answered in the same soft, calm manner. "You're going all right." She chuckled. "We'll stop it for now. Your experience was brief, but it took you a long time to get there." Naruto looked up and found that the moon was already high on the sky, starting its journey back to Earth. He nodded and got up, preparing to go back to the small village. Time passed, and soon almost 2 months had gone by since he had breathed again on the shores of Argentia. His clothes were prepared and finished, and he now used them every day. Even if that meant to actually have to do laundry much more often than normal. The clothes the people of Berasil had made for him were intricate. He had a black, tight shirt that served as a primary layer between his skin and the other clothes. On the top of that he used a bulkier shirt, also black, made of soft fabric, that was warm in winter and cool in the summer. Or rather, at night and during the day. He had had to become used to the shifting pattern of the weather there. This shirt was extremely loose around his arms and torso, so he eventually settled up in using belts to strap the tissue around his body. Also black. He had questioned why they had made everything black, and was explained that, in the desert, dark clothes were often much more comfortable than brighter ones, no matter how counterintuitive that might sound. Even with the straps, it was still loose on most of his upper body, with the exception of the arms and, as such, it created bags of cooled air that helped him keep his body temperature at a good level. A pair of black pants and boots completed the set. Apparently, using sandals in the desert wasn't a good idea. There were scorpions, spiders and other venomous animals that could give you quite some trouble if you were to be bitten or stung by one of them. His training sessions also kept going, almost every night, the time at which most of the people were asleep and, therefore, wouldn't feel curious as to what he would be doing on the beach. Difficult as it was to access, it was still possible for someone to spy upon them. One night he had been meditating for longer than normal, when he sensed Kyubi move from the spot she was sitting, stop in front of him and smirk. He could swear that the being in front of him was not a fox. Suddenly, he sensed a rapid movement, and raised his arm, blocking the attack she had launched towards him, while immediately opening his eyes. "Excellent. You understand now what I meant about this helping you in battle?" she asked, smirking. "Yeah, I do. Although I would have preferred you had told me so right from the beginning, instead of waiting almost 3 goddamn months to show it to me," he answered. But he was smiling too as he did so. "You, of all people, should know that it's easy for you to understand, heck no! To believe, something about training if you experience it firsthand than if someone tells you about it." Naruto could only laugh sheepishly while embarrassingly scratching his head at her comment. "Anyway, I think we're ready to move to the next stage. From now on, I want you to try to maintain that state of mind while with your eyes open and while performing your day-to-day tasks. It will be much more difficult, but I have faith in you. But not for today, though. She continued, you successfully passed the test and you've done enough for now. How about trying some jutsu to relax? Naruto nodded, satisfied. Although he understood the importance of meditation and had grown quite adept at it, he missed using his ninja techniques. It had been 3 months since he had come back to life. He didn't think he had been so much time without using jutsu before. At least since he had become a ninja. I reckon you have been taught how to use the 4th Hokage's jutsu, the Rasengan, right? Upon his confirmation, she continued, I want you to try and do it again. This time without clones. Naruto scowled a little. He had never been able to do it before without resorting to his clones or Kyuubi's influence. You can try and break some of the rocks on the cliffs, but be mindful not to put too much power in the jutsu, or we might make such a ruckus that will alert the villagers to what we're doing or to me, she said carefully. Hi. Kyuubi was right. He didn't know if people there had heard about tailed demons, but it was a likely supposition that, powerful as they were, they could cross oceans without second thoughts, so they probably knew about them too. Them finding out he had a tailed being inside him could destroy all the trust he had earned there. And he didn't want to lose that. He made a few attempts at the Rasengan, but totally failed. With time, he noticed he was even getting a lot of difficulty in just molding the chakra for use. Kyuubi seemed to notice something was amiss, because she asked if something was wrong. I don't know. He answering, struggling to mold the chakra, grinding his teeth. I'm having an absurd amount of difficulty in just molding the chakra, let alone shape it for the Rasengan. I don't understand. Kyuubi seemed somewhat taken back by this. How's that possible, if you can summon me? When I summon you, I don't even have to mold chakra, don't ask me why. He answered. I wonder, she said, walking around him, inspecting him, could this be related to your emerging bloodline? You can summon me, but are unable to use chakra outside yourself. Is there something else you haven't been telling me? She asked sharply. Naruto shifted uncomfortably while swallowing. Well, there is this weird dust I see all the time. Dust? Explain, the vixen demanded. It's everywhere I look, and any movement anything does causes it to shimmer and wave. He thrashed his arms around wildly, as if to prove his point. Even now as I try to mold chakra, it swirls around me. It's very annoying and distracting, damn it. Baka. That's a great thing, if it is what I think it is. She stood silent a moment, measuring him. Listen to this and listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is unknown to everyone but me and the powers of the world. This is not something to go telling others. She emphasized, every living creature is made up of 2 forces, the physical and the mental or psychological. The physical is, of course, chakra. You ninja gather it, and use it to do your ninjutsu. And like a muscle, the more you use it, the more you strain yourself, the more it develops. She paused for a moment, looking at him, before starting to pace back and forth. The other one is created every time a being dedicates time to intellectual activities. The gathering of knowledge, the solving of riddles, the training of the mind. Now every, and I mean every, living being, animal or plant, has a mind of their own. Granted their levels of development vary, but they all have one. The point is, she stressed, that this second force is always being created. But instead of being gathered inside one's body, it is freed into the environment. I believe this second power is the one you are able to see. It would also explain the rather peculiar shape of your eyes. What do you mean? Naruto asked, slightly confused. Your eyes bear an uncanny resemblance to the taijutsu, the yin-yang, which symbolizes balance. It has been a long time since anyone was ever able to sense, let alone use, the mental power of beings. The last one to do it disappeared even before I was born. I believe, the old blood has been purified with your visit to the life stream. You can only use what's inside you for something within you, and with some training, I believe you will be able to use the other force. The fact that you've told me that dust swirled around you when you tried to use chakra, seems to support my assumptions. Great. So now I'm unable to use jutsu and have to start from the scratch on something there isn't even a scroll on? He said sarcastically. Haven't you been paying attention to me, at all? Kyuubi asked sharply. The dust is a product of the mind and as such is controlled by will. You only have to train to use your will. Granted it is difficult, but fortunately we already started meditation. Master it, and the rest will go on a breeze. As for chakra and jutsu, are you a complete dummy? You cannot use your chakra outside yourself, but I can use mine. And with time and training you will be able to use mine too. Naruto thought it was pretty unfair that she snapped off like that but said nothing about it, since she seemed to be irritated about his rather childish remarks and complaints, so he settled for just asking why it would be necessary to train to use her chakra, since he had done it before. The vixen frowned slightly before answering. When you used my chakra in the past, I was subordinated to you by the seal. On a contract though, we are as equals, and have to learn to synchronize with each other before you can do that. Naruto thought about it for a few moments. And how do we do that? He asked. We are linked through our minds, so we have to synchronize them with each other. It is not an easy task, but the results will bring advantages to us both. At an inquisitive glance from the blonde, she elaborated, you will be able to use my almost unending chakra resources, and I will be able to feel. What do you mean? He asked, curious at the strangeness of the statement. Kyubi hesitated a little, before turning her back to him and saying in a low, unsure voice, I can't feel the world as I am now. Not like I used to before I became unbalanced. My body is chakra alone, so even as you summon me, I don't have the same perception of reality as you humans have. I wish to feel again. It was something the tailed beast could only achieve upon contract, and I miss it. But we are under a contract now, why can't you feel yet? He asked, confused. The contract is still somewhat incomplete. In the past it would be reinforced by a priest, but until we get to Fire Country, I don't think we will find someone who bears the knowledge of legend to do such a thing. And in Fire Country there is such a person? They're all terrified of you. The Fire Temple is bound to maintain scrolls on ancient knowledge that can be used by one of the priests there to help us. We only have to hope we can convince them to do it. It's my hope. The last sentence was whispered so lowly, Naruto couldn't understand it. Let us not drown ourselves in hopes and sorrows. Let's try and synchronize. You must concentrate and try to feel my consciousness. What about you? Naruto asked. I'll do the same. Naruto closed his eyes and prepared for meditation. Once he felt that he was ready, he started to search his mind for a sign of Kyubi's conscience. After a lot of work, in which he searched through feelings, hopes, fears, and memories, he found a small object on the far corner of his mind. Suddenly, Naruto was there, just like when he was inside the sewers, just him, the darkness, and the object, which was a monolith, A/N, think about 2001, A Space Odyssey, people. He waited for a few moments, until it became apparent that nothing was going to happen, and then reached out with his arm. As soon as he touched its surface, bright lines appeared in the monolith. He retreated a little, wary, and watched, intrigued, as the lines proceeded to draw the muzzle of a fox surrounded by 12 different tails. The lines grew bolder and bolder, until all of the monolith was engulfed in light, making it seem like it was a door, from a dark room to the shiny outside. He took a deep breath and stepped in. He was seeing the beach once again, just as he had been before they had started the process. This time, however, he felt like the mix between two bodies. He had two different perceptions at the same time. He was aware of two minds working together, trying to function as one. One half of him was really eager to start, and, remembering what he had heard earlier, he deduced it was Kyubi's mind. He actually knew what to do, so proceeded to try and form a Rasengan without any further delay. It was very difficult maintaining the balance between the two parts, however, and, as they approached the critical stage of the Rasengan, Naruto suddenly lost control and the jutsu flared up, exploding in a wave of energy that shook the houses of the village to the core, while making one hell of a noise. In an instant, they were separated again, and soon Kyubi materialized, worry and anger in her eyes, saying to him, "What have you done? There's no way they didn't feel this. Pray that they don't associate it with you, or we're busted." I don't know what happened. It was all going alright, but suddenly a part of me just went ahead before time and it got out of control. Serious. Naruto tried to explain. Kyubi looked at him for a moment before bowing her head in shame. That must have been my fault. I was too eager and probably couldn't wait to actually feel something. She was silenced by the alarmed gesture of Naruto, who looked towards the cliff, his eyes swirling oddly. Up above, a lone figure, the figure of the village's seer, stood looking down straight at them. And Naruto could feel more than see the surprise in the old woman's face. She then turned back and, with a speed he wouldn't have thought possible for the old lady to move, disappeared towards the village. The new Kyubi. Naruto ran. He ran as fast as he could, which was considerably fast, considering he was a ninja and was using Kyubi's chakra to fuel his muscles further. The vixen ran alongside with him, her ethereal form shimmering slightly at the stars. He could practically feel her distress. It wasn't surprising, really. They had been trying to further reinforce their connection, by strengthening that which Kyubi had called their resonance with each other. For a moment it actually seemed to have worked. They had really shared their thoughts and senses, as if there had been two different beings inside the same body. It had been a surreal experience of a sorts. Something had gone wrong though, and while trying to form a Rasengan in their combined state, the chakra somehow exploded wildly, apparently drawing the attention of the old woman he had seen before at the feast. He was now chasing her as fast as he could, after having climbed the whole cliff with one jump. He would have been amazed if it had happened on another occasion. But he was too distressed to notice it at the moment. What was even more unsettling was the fact that, no matter how much he ran, no matter how much quicker he knew he was in regards to the old lady, he hadn't found her yet. At the speed he had moved, he was supposed to have caught her even before she had had the time to reach the forest that connected the beach he had been to the half-destroyed city his saviors resided in. If the old lady told the others, he would most likely be chased out of the city. If nothing worse. He could put up a great fight, and he doubted these people knew how to counteract jutsu. He hadn't seen no fighters nor anything that indicated the presence of a military force, but if he could manage, he would prefer to avoid a fight. Besides, just because he couldn't see them, it didn't mean they weren't there. His head was about to explode with so many thoughts, and Naruto felt the start of what would most assuredly be one hell of an headache. He was so distracted by his own thoughts he almost missed a faint scent. He couldn't identify it, but that wasn't a problem. Kyubi had already picked it up through their link. I smell her. I smell her, she said into his mind, and Naruto sighed in relief. They were catching up. The scent guided them to what seemed to be a well-concealed trapdoor in the ground. Naruto cautiously opened it, brushing the dust aside, and saw a large staircase, leading into the darkness of the ground. After a moment of consideration, he stepped inside. To Naruto, it seemed that he had been walking for hours in the darkness before he finally saw light at the end of the tunnel. He had been using Kyubi's eyes to guide him, so the faint light shone like a star to him. He deactivated her chakra and they both proceeded across the tunnel. Kyubi's image fainted and disappeared, returning to his mindscape, shortly before they reached the doorway that ended the tunnel. The brightness left him blind for a few moments, the white overpowering even the faint glimmering golden dust that always seemed to surround him now, and through his trained senses, he felt something move. He felt the cold tip of a metal being pressed against his neck. Several, actually, and when he finally managed to see, several young women, with black skin, like all the other inhabitants of the town, dressed in white vests, surrounded him. They carried staffs of some sort, with a blade at one of the ends. Coincidentally, the very end that was turned to his skin. Crap, he thought, and felt Kyubi spring into action. He gave her even more chakra, and when she materialized, the vixen was the size of a large man. Several of the girls stepped back when she released a low growl, her 12 tails swinging back and forth. She swung them across the room they were in and managed to free Naruto from the blades this way. He smirked and was about to reach his weapons pouch when another woman, this one slightly older, entered the room from the exit opposite the one they had entered. She wore a more intricate vest, and it was apparent her rank was superior to those present before. She rose her right hand, showing a small statue Naruto didn't manage to figure out, and said some words in a foreign language. Much more exotic than even the ones they talked on the city. A blinding pain struck Naruto in the abdomen, where he knew the seal was. At the same time, Kyubi bent in suffering and, letting out a long-suffered growl, disappeared. Blackness claimed his body, and the last thing Naruto saw was the women gathering around him, like a pack of wolves on a defenseless prey. When he woke up, Naruto felt a certain difficulty to move, as if his body was reluctant in getting up, so he took his time observing what he could. He appeared to be in some sort of large room, with very high ceiling, as if it had been carved out directly from the stone it was made of. Torches hung from the walls as far as he could manage to turn his aching head. He tried to contact Kyubi and failed. Panic rising in his chest, he sat up. Ah, I see you are awake, he heard a voice say. He turned around as fast as he could and saw the old lady, dressed in an amazing attire, looking at him intently. She looked very alive and active, in contrast with the appearance she bared in the outside world. Yes, because it was apparent to him that he was in some sort of underground dungeon. Shadows flickered in the places the torches couldn't light up. Bastards, he growled, getting to his knees. Who are you? What have you done to me? I apologize the way we treated you, the elder answered. She talked slowly as if he had difficulty talking to him, but we could not risk you trashing around, injuring our sisters and maybe yourself. The power of the goddess is indeed great, she said, closing her eyes. Somehow, Naruto had the feeling she was talking about the vixen. How do you know about Kyubi? He asked, getting up slowly. A few more moments and he would be up, then he would have to start looking for a way out, in case things started to heat up. The elder opened one eye to look at him. It is obvious, for those who are trained to see such things. Our order keeps the secrets of avatars ever since its creation, millennia ago. She laughed roughly at his bewildered face. Boy, it is obvious you were subject of a sealing. One against the will of the goddess, but something has happened. I heard your story at the feast. So you managed to return the tails to the goddess, heh? She laughed again. Very, very good. That seemed to have gained you her good favors, huh? It has truly been a long time since the goddess walked the earth as what she is and not as some incomplete demon. Naruto straightened his posture, completely forgetting the escape route idea. The old woman continued her speech. She seemed to have made an ancient contract with you, yes? Yes, that was what she told us too. Almost bit me head off when I tried to suggest freeing her from you. She laughed again. Her speech was a bit confusing, with some words that sounded kind of ancient to Naruto, and he had trouble following her. He voiced his thoughts with his usual bluntness. Why don't you speak normally, like John's? This caused the old lady to laugh even more. Naruto was starting to like her. She didn't seem to get irritated easily, and had what seemed a good sense of humor. Straight to the point, hey kid? And no soft words either. Naruto had the grace of looking embarrassed. Just for a moment. The truth is, it has been some time since I last spoke the Eastron. My vocabulary is a little dusty. Eastron? What the hell is that? He asked, confused. Ho ho hoo, you don't know it, boy. Has the ancient history been forgotten on your half of the world? She took a sip from a small glass sitting on a small table beside her. He had not noticed it there earlier. Eastron is the name given to the main language spoken on your half of the world. Here there's a language called the Westron which serves the same purpose. It's the one we speak on the village. There was another language which was the common language for all the world called Esperanto. But I suppose, correctly, that you wouldn't know of it. How long ago was this you're talking about? Several thousands of years ago. Hold your horses, lad. I'm not that old. She laughed at his face. All the members of this order have to learn these languages among several other things that don't concern you. Anyway, she continued, the contract is corrupted by the seal. They're interfering with each other. That's why you cannot synchronize very well. So? He asked. But he was already having a hunch as to where this was going. So we're removing the seal and reinforcing the contract. And I suppose I don't have much of a choice. Not really. She smiled sardonically at him, but it would be better if you cooperated. What did you do to me? With that doll? She smiled to him. Wouldn't you like to know? There was a moment of silence before he answered. Fine. If he had known it was going to be like this, then he most assuredly would have thought twice before agreeing with the old lady. Whatever measure he had assumed they would do to him, it was not this. There were girls. Girls scribbling down strange kanji in his body. His whole body. He couldn't see himself, and he was glad he couldn't, but if the heat on his cheeks and the snickers the old hag was making whenever she looked at him were any indication of it, then he was surely making a phase that would put the one Ebiso sensei had made when he threatened him of telling the others how he had been fooled by his sexy no jutsu to shame. Overall, he was just glad his body wasn't reacting to the contact. Maybe the embarrassment was too much for it to register. He had been directed to a larger, circular room, and was now standing in the center of several concentric rings carved on the very floor. The rings had some writings inside them, but he couldn't make out the language and assumed it was that Westron language the old lady had talked about. The last of the youths got up and left the circles, and Naruto sighed in relief. The old lady got up from the chair she had been sitting and said to him, "Right? Seems we're ready. Please be mindful to stand as relaxed as you possibly can. Try to forget my daughters, will ya?" she added, laughing. Naruto turned red and refrained himself from making a rude gesture to her. The old lady clapped her hands and, as if on cue, several women entered the room. These were not girls but full-grown women and wore what looked like a very light, revealing ceremonial dresses. Naruto turned away from the sight, embarrassed again, and looked at the ground. If he couldn't look even at them, he wondered how he had the idea to peek at the hot springs, back when they were about to start the journey to meet Akatsuki's spy on Orochimaru. No time for that, he thought, pushing away such trail of thought. When Naruto finally gathered up the courage to look up again, he saw the women displaced around him, on the outmost ring of them all. He also noticed that they were crouching inside small circles that were placed in the ring at steady intervals. Others were standing up on several markings on the ground, each one of them holding a statue like the one he had seen before. He gulped. This was going to hurt, he just knew it. As one, all the women started humming and chanting in a language he couldn't understand. The chants held great musicality, and he soon felt like he was traveling on a stream of words, softly nudged by a wind of words. Slowly but steadily, he started to listen to them and found he could make out their meaning. The language itself was still unknown to him, but somehow, he could apprehend the meaning behind the mere words. Come now, and see that which is hidden. Come now, and grasp the meaning of life itself. That which you are about to see is the most pure being of all. No evil taints her heart. She is pure. She knows no hate, but has not been loved. She is pure, she is innocent. Guide her, for she is pure. Guide her, for she is your hope. She is salvation, she is pure. No evil taints her heart, yet she is not immune. Cleanse your heart from darkness. Don't taint that which is pure. She is pure, she is innocent. Born again, for the sake of love. Guide her. Guide her. Love her. Naruto felt himself being engulfed in light. There was a strange bubble of a sorts in front of him. It was a large bubble. Light was shining from it, and he couldn't make out its insides. Then the light turned liquid and then solidified on a form. And suddenly he could see. The bubble looked now like one of those soap bubbles he used to make as a child when old man Ichiraku offered him a toy for that purpose on his birthday. His first birthday present. Why was it its first? He could not remember. All seemed so far away. The figure inside the bubble was clearly defined now. It was a girl. A beautiful one at that. It couldn't be much older than he was. Her face was peaceful and innocent. Her body slender and agile. Beautiful. He noticed that she had fox ears sprouting out of her hair, and behind her, several tails moved softly. 12 tails. Cute, he thought. He knew this person. Where did he knew her from? He couldn't remember. It was painful to try to remember. Pain he had received suffering because of this person. Demon. Yes, demon. She was a demon. Her eyes opened slowly, and behind those enthralling eyelashes he saw the red, sliced eyes of a demon. He raised his hand, intending to hit the thing. Killing this demon would be fitting. It deserved it. It had made him suffer. Destruction. It had brought destruction. Killing it would be fitting. The girl, no, the demon tried to retreat, to escape from the menace. Its eyes were open in fear. Yet he hesitated. It was pleading for help. Those eyes were screaming silently for help, in fear. He looked at his raised hand and saw the claw of a monster, about to attack a pure being. Like killing a child, he thought. This was no demon. She was pure, his heart told him so. And she was so pretty. He reached the bubble with his claw-like hand and the figure recoiled in fear, anticipating the attack. But it never came. Instead, he used his monstrous hand to cut the bubble open. The light that escaped from it shattered the abomination to pieces and left only a normal, human hand. The girl trembled slightly, in fear, when he touched her. Following an impulse, he embraced her and hugged her. She stood in shock for a moment, before hugging him back and let out a sigh of pure relief. Light engulfed them and Naruto screamed in pain. He was alone again, and his head seemed like it was splitting in pain. He was seeing images all around him. He was waking up for the first time, seeing the sun behind the trees. He was jumping across a river, his tails flashing behind him. He understood. Those were Kyuubi's memories. Light everywhere. He was talking to a man with white pupilless eyes. Agreeing and bonding with him. He was talking to a dark-haired youth. He screamed in pain as his tails were stolen from him. Darkness, despair, sadness, hope. Happiness. He was talking to a golden-haired young man on a beach. He was called Naruto. Light everywhere. The boy turned fox was engulfed by light, the memories of his experience already fading. Already forgotten? Hugh! He groaned as he tried to get up. What the hell happened? He was nursing one hell of an headache of doom. The process was a success. The reinforcement of the link has been completed. He turned to his left and saw the old lady again. He sat up, realizing for the first time that he had been laying on a bed. He was in a small room. We moved you here in order for you to have some rest. The process you've been through is not a soft one, especially for the human. So, my link with Kyuubi is stabilized now? He asked. Oh yes. See for yourself, she said, pointing at his navel. He lifted his shirt and saw that he no longer had any swirling pattern on his abdomen, but instead, a fox head could be seen, its 12 tails extending towards his upper body and to his back. Cool. It looks like a tattoo. Glad you like it. Now look over there, the old lady commanded, pointing to his right. Naruto did as instructed. Against the wall was a girl, looking like she would rather not be seen there. She was wearing a white dress like the ones he had seen before, although not as revealing, much to his relief. Only her navel was exposed, but her skirt was cut so that her legs were free to move with maximum angle, and sometimes, when she battled, Naruto would later find out that it would show almost all of her lower body. It looked almost like one of the ancient female combat dresses he used to see on the books. On her head sat 2 fox-like ears and behind her sprouted several white tails. For a moment he was unable to speak. I made this for you, he heard her say, and was surprised to find that the fearsome power that was always present on her voice had disappeared and that she talked in a soft tone. He looked at her hands as she approached and saw she was carrying a necklace with a small doll made of dark wood. It had all the aspect of having been made by someone who was not used to handwork, bearing the mark of the amateur. It represented a woman with fox ears and tails, much like the girl herself. The figure held itself in a stylish pose. It is custom for both parts to exchange gifts in the end of the ritual, in reinforcement of the bond they made to each other, she said somewhat nervously while holding her hands in front of him, offering him the necklace. I hope you like it. I did my best, but I'm not very good with craftsmanship. Naruto suddenly realized his mouth had been hanging open all the time, so he closed it. Kyubi? He asked uncertainly, is that you? The girl shifted the weight from one leg to the other, nervously. Yes, I know I don't look like much. I mean, I know you were expecting something more imposing and... You're beautiful, Naruto said in amazement, effectively cutting her ranting and managing to catch her off guard, something that had never simultaneously happened before. You think so? She asked, uncertain. Of course I am. Are you crazy? I thank you. She smiled broadly, so broadly her eyes actually closed. Naruto couldn't help but watch with some amusement as her ears perked up and her tails swung in accord to her high spirits. He received the necklace from her hands and immediately put it around his neck. It's very pretty, he said sincerely, and Kyubi smiled again, happy. I was so afraid you wouldn't like my appearance. I mean, I don't remember what happened during the ritual, and Naruto lost the trail of her speech around then. It seemed that, now that she had been accepted, all the stress that the kitsune had been feeling was being ejected from her in a torrent of blabbering. She was practically bouncing in excitement, now. And I was fearing you wouldn't like the present, because I don't really know how to do those things. I mean, I could have made it with a jutsu, but I wanted it to be special. Personal. She finished, breathing hard. Why wouldn't I like it? It's really good. If it had been me, I would most assuredly destroy half the forest, before actually doing something right. Fortunately, he was looking at the doll and didn't notice the blush appearing on Kyubi's embarrassed face. You must have been pretty fast to finish this before I was awake, he said, tugging the wooden figure inside his shirt much to Kyubi's satisfaction. Not really. You were asleep for almost 3 days. There was a moment of silence. What? He screamed. Man, Johns is going to want to know what happened to us. We're toast. The chief already knows the truth about what happened. So does the rest of the village, said the old lady. We do not bear any prejudice towards the goddess. How could we? Our village's very foundation is her. Wow. Really? It was clear to everyone in the room that Naruto did not understand what she was talking about, except for the part of him not being screwed. The elder sighed. But that's enough of this matter. I have something to discuss to you first, regarding your relation to the goddess. Most of it she already knows, but, if she wishes, and you agree with it, she may remain here as I explain things to you. Naruto nodded to show his agreement, and patted the side of the bed, inviting the vixen to sit down. She did it with a grace that left him amazed. The old lady seemed to be having the time of her life, observing the two of them. The ritual the two of you just undertook is one of extreme complexity. Its creation is lost in the shifting sands of time, and we can no longer create something like that anymore. We have no doubt the goddess herself had something to do in its creation. She paused a moment to take another sip at the ever-present cup. No one knows what happens during it, yet it is obvious something happens. During it, your bond is reformed and reinforced. If it goes well, that is. If it goes wrong, it kills the human taking the ritual. Perhaps it's some sort of test, I don't know. The ritual is a process of rebirth for the avatar. That is the word we use to describe the beings you call Bijou. The kitsune you see here now is the same as before. She knows who she is and her techniques. However, the process adapts her to her human counterpart, and she is now mentally the same as a human teenager. It is probable that she will not remember most of the things that have passed before the sealing, unless she has recollected them to you in a conversation after it. So basically, she might just remember the last 14, maybe 15 years of her life. Naruto summarized. It's the price to pay for the completion of the ritual. No one knows why. The elder confirmed. Naruto nodded. Fine by me. I don't have any problems with that. Something stirred in his memory, but it fled away before he could grasp it. He turned towards Kyubi and looked at her, finding her staring at some point on the wall. It was obvious she had lost the concentration on the topic. He nudged her lightly with an arm and was rewarded with a jump and a squeal from her part. I agree too, she exclaimed wildly. Naruto laughed. Well, it seems everything is all right, so I guess I'll just leave you alone. You are free to walk around the temple if you want. The old lady said to him. I'm sure you two will find something to do. Kyubi jumped from the bed. Yes. Yes, come, let me show you the place, she said enthusiastically, pulling his hand. Naruto got up and followed her out of the room. When he was passing the doorway, she felt the grip of the old lady in his arm and heard the whisper, "She is now yours for good, or for evil. Guide her well. Guide her well." The old woman's voice reverberated in his mind as he followed Kyubi across the corridors and the rooms of the temple. Only now he was starting to realize the sheer size of the thing. Abruptly, he realized she was talking to him. They do all sort of stuff here. Meditation, combat training, it's hard to believe they're not a ninja village. I mean, this seems like a rather peaceful place, and from what they've shown me in the maps it's really isolated from other inhabited regions, but still they keep preparing their generations as if they needed to prepare themselves against the attacks of invaders or something. They had arrived at a large room, filled with bookcases and rock tables. This is the library. I suppose it has some interesting stuff, but I never really took the time to read any of the books here. Most of the apprentices on this order come here to study history and other theoretical subjects. If I remember correctly, every girl who tries to become accepted must take a test, which includes a theoretical exam. Oh. Sort of like the academy exam. Naruto nodded, agreeing. I suppose so. She agreed hesitantly, motioning for him to follow her. I retain few recollections of the earlier years of our relationship. To be honest, I must say that until your fight in Wave Country I had never taken interest in your life, she said, as they moved across the corridors, her tails flicking with the movement of her legs. I'm not trying to say you were not interesting, or anything, I just wasn't in the mood, she finished lamely. Naruto suddenly realized she was trying to make an apology. It's okay, he said, we'll have plenty of time to talk about ourselves while we're here. I think and still want to know how you came to be, he added, smirking ruefully. Kyubi laughed. I'll never tell you that. I'll find out sooner or later, he promised in what he hoped was a menacing smirk. She seemed to shrug it off without a second thought. They were arriving at the end of one tunnel and Naruto was perceiving a glow that had to mean he was looking at daylight. Look at this. Isn't it beautiful? The vixen girl asked. Wow. He was looking at what was most assuredly an underground waterfall. Far away, up above, a large aperture on the rock walls let the sunlight get in. Uncountable crystal formations reflected it in all directions and colors, forming a sight to see. The waterfall created a large lake. Looking closely, he saw several cages holding several cultures of fish inside. They're practically self-sustainable, here, Kyubi explained. They have everything they need to survive without outside help. Of course, living just on fish when it is not necessary is strange, so the villagers give part of their loot on the hunting to them. They share the fish. While she talked, several women from the order entered the place and started to check on the fishes. Kyubi exited the room and he followed her. The vixen was getting fairly excited now, as they entered a large room, with several windows on the walls. These were located high from the ground. The ceiling too was inconceivably high. The overall structure of the place didn't let any doubt in Naruto's mind. This was a training room. Of course, the presence of several members of the order training in front of them might have helped too. This is the training room. They train here on every single battle techniques I know. I do not know why, but it doesn't really matter, I suppose. Come on, we've got to try it. It seemed that details weren't Kyubi's best, especially when she was this restless. It was clear she had been itching to bring him there. He followed her across the huge room. He noticed how the women stepped out of Kyubi's way. Not in a fearful way but in respect. Several made small bows to them and Naruto caught the words, spoken hesitantly in Eastron, red eyes, directed to him. This confused him. He would have understood if they had said that to Kyubi. After all, that was the color of her slit eyes. But no, to her they referred as Avatar. He remembered hearing the old lady use the same name to address Kyubi and decided to take a look at the library, once he had the time. Kyubi stopped in the middle of the largest battle circle, right in the center of the room. The other attendants cleared the ring. Naruto frowned interestingly at this. The vixen girl had something up her sleeve, for sure. She turned to him with an eager smile and said, Naruto, let's battle. Hi, he agreed, enthusiastically. It had been a long time since he last used his muscles in a fight. He could see the shimmering, ever-present golden dust move softly, as the watchers positioned themselves around the training field. He was starting to feel the adrenaline of combat again. Kyubi adopted a pose he had never seen before, but that was slightly familiar all the same. Her left leg was extended forward and slightly bent at the knee. Her foot stretched and her toes touched the ground, softly, hardly leaving any mark. Her other leg stood behind, also bent, supporting the body and providing an effective way of springing to action. Her body curved slightly to the left, in accordance to the stretched leg, and her arms were lifted. one in front of her and the other stretched outwards. Her hands were shaped in order to imitate the claws of a wild animal, which was effective because her nails were long, without being repulsive, A/N, just like a normal woman's nails, nothing too spectacular. Her ears were lifted and attentive to every small noise, and he tails stood behind her. 3 supporting her body, aiding her leg, the others lifted around her, like an enormous back shield. She was smirking slightly and one of her curved canines was peeking out of her lips, giving her a mischievous look. Naruto had to admit it was a pretty impressive sight. Because he had nothing better, he settled himself into adopting the standard taijutsu stance. Time seemed to pass slowly and not a noise could be heard. Naruto was getting slightly impatient, but he wasn't about to go rushing against an opponent he was sure was stronger than him. Every time. Finally, with a flick of her tails, Kyubi jumped to an attack. Her hands were still in the same pose and she attacked him with blinding speed. He managed to dodge a few of her blows but, when they parted from each other, he was still sporting a lot of scratches from her attacks. The scene repeated itself countless times over and over, with Naruto unable to do much more than simply trying to avoid contact. He was downcast. How had he ever thought of saving Sasuke, if he didn't even manage to make a counter-attack? He was laughable. And there was still another problem. The accursed gold dust was messing up with him, and it made it difficult for him to concentrate on movements he could hardly see, when it was dancing around him in accordance to her movements. The weight of his own thoughts hit him like a brick. Or rather like a brick wall. If that thing moved in accordance to sentient movement, all he had to do was trying to guess the next stage of her attacks based on how the dust behaved. His spirits lifted immediately at the prospect of a winning chance. Of course, doing it was harder than thinking it, and it took him a lot of time to starting to figure things out. It probably didn't help either that several of the girls watching them were now moving and screaming for Kyubi to finish him. They probably didn't know who he was, he thought. The vixen girl, however, knew and wasn't very satisfied with the comments she was hearing. The change of mood, however, was very subtle, and if he could read it, it was probably due to their affinity. It wasn't a pleasant experience. In order to be able to read the response of the dust to her movements, Naruto had to take a lot of blows to analyze, or try to anyway, the movements to their last moments. He was wearing the clothes Johns had given to him, which were not made for combat, and, as such, were getting rather trashed away. On second thought, they were getting really trashed away. When his shirt, the last layer protecting his torso skin, was blown away to bits by a particularly vicious attack, Naruto decided he had had enough time to analyze the attacks. He readied himself for the next blow, squinting his eyes in deep concentration. Kyubi was coming towards him like a cannonball, a predatory glint on her eyes. He saw her raise her hand in preparation for the attack. He watched as the dusty particles moved towards him, moments before the hand itself followed the same path. And he dodged. Naruto dodged, bending himself by the knees, letting her arm pass him by, close to his exposed chest, past his head. He dodged, ending up looking like he was laying in some invisible bed. Kyubi's eyes widened slightly in surprise, and she watched the tiny muscles in his body, straining under the stress. They stood like that a moment, and then, extending his arms in order to create more momentum, Naruto spun around and landed a powerful kick on the side of her belly. Kyubi was projected away, being forced to twist herself in the air in order to manage to land on her feet. Naruto noticed, as he got back in position, that she used her tails to maneuver in the air. All had passed like it had been in slow motion. "You dodged," she said, delighted. "Can you do it again?" He straightened his back, adopting a similar pose to Mato Gai's preferred stance, and moved his hand in a confident invitation for an attack. And so she did. Several hours were passed like this, and by the end of the session Naruto was fairly sure he had gotten the hang of the prediction technique. It seemed his bloodline was useful for something, after all. He was intending on showing the vixen girl this, by stopping her attacks. And he blocked and immobilized her hands successfully. He allowed himself a victorious smirk before being knocked to the ground by one of her tails. "Hey! No fair!" he argued indignantly. Never let your guard down, look beneath the underneath, right?" She laughed. "Gee, and here I thought I could finally beat you in a round." "You'll get there," she said reassuringly, wearing a smile all the time. "You did really well for a first time. Not everyone would have been able to withstand the match like you did." One of the girls in the assistants, which had meanwhile approached them, harumphed disdainfully. Kyubi immediately turned her head towards the sound, startling several people. "You disagree?" she asked flatly. The young woman who spoke gave her a confident smirk before saying, "He did nothing special. All he did was getting trashed by you all around. Any of us here could do better. I know I could." "You want to bet on that?" the goddess said dangerously. "All you want?" the other said, respectfully but also adding a veiled insult. Several other women were now looking alarmed, and Naruto caught one running towards a door that, he knew, would lead her to the place where the old lady had remained. Your pride will be enough, Kyubi answered, but you'll not fight me. You just say I had gone harder on you than him. If you were to lose, you will battle him himself. The other smiled and walked away for positioning. Several murmurs were being heard now, and the crowd started to spread around the circle once again. A lot more people were coming in to watch, some running as fast as they could. Kyubi, he whispered urgently, you know I'm all thrashed, right? I won't stand a chance. I have faith in you, she answered evenly. You will not let me down, I'm sure of it. She squeezed his arm in support, and Naruto felt his wounds closing and a refreshing feeling washed over him. He looked down and saw the pendant, miraculously safe, glowing faintly in a red light, and knew she was healing him. It was a pleasant feeling, nothing like the one he felt when she used to heal him in the past. But then again, the situation was different. He took the pendant off and put it in her startled hands. There was a fearful, questioning look in her eyes. Keep it safe for me, he asked her, and she nodded. He turned around and strode confidently for the arena, not a hint of doubt on his face. He would win this. He also took a position inside the ring, this time not assuming a stance at all. He just stood there as if he were too tired, undisciplined, or otherwise unable to assume a proper combat behavior. In reality, Naruto was straining his eyes to the limit, and his muscles were tense, ready to move at the slightest need. He tried to take as much details on the movement of the dust as he could. Don't worry, I won't take much time beating your sorry ass, the girl said. But Naruto hadn't been in Team 7 for nothing. All the time he spent hearing Sasuke taunt him had given him the necessary self-control to withstand at least that type of psychological attacks. And this girl was not even close to Sasuke's toes when it came to insults. Are you going to start this, or was all that stuff about you being better than a slug at fighting just talk? He asked back. Truthfully, he didn't think the girl would fight better than slugs. He had seen some doing pretty impressive things under the directions of Tsunade, the 5th Hokage. The girl seemed to have just as short temper as she had big ego. The small comeback he had launched was apparently enough to set her seething, and she didn't hesitate in launching an attack. It was much easier to interpret, Naruto thought. On one hand, she didn't move nearly as fast as Kyubi, and on the other hand, the dust seemed to react much better to her movements than it had to the vixen girls. Maybe it had something to do with their origins, Naruto thought detachedly. He dodged all the attacks, which only contributed to the girl's increasing frustration. Finally, she did an attack all too similar to Kyubi's last one. Naruto reacted the same way, but this time, instead of staying there, he placed his hands on the ground and used the momentum to lift his body, using his legs to kick the other in the face. The woman was sent flying several feet in the air before landing messily a few meters away. She got up, whipping her face angrily. With a cry of rage, she attacked once more. Naruto, however, received an alarming movement from the dust and jumped as high as he could, away from the girl. Quite on time, since she was now using one of the bladed staffs he had seen the women use against him. Several gasps were heard and a few cries of outrage were even heard. It seemed the girl had broken a few rules with her trick. But Naruto knew he couldn't stop. He knew from experience, he would only have peace if he defeated everything she could throw at him. That didn't mean they would be on good terms, but at least she would stop trying to attack him in the future. But he had to deliver an utter defeat for that to happen. Automatically he reached for Kyubi like he had done so many times in the past days and relayed the message. He heard her agree and then felt surprised. It seemed something had remained from their earlier link. This could be useful. This time things were serious. Her movements had changed and it was harder to dodge. But still he managed to do it. He exploited every opening he had, delivering powerful attacks and avoiding the blade. In the end it all came to one move. The girl jumped and brought the staff down on him, on a slicing motion. On the last moment, Naruto stepped aside, lifted his arm, let the blade pass aside it, and closed it down on the staff, seizing it. He then applied a swinging motion to it, making it escape the grasp of the girl so that he now held the control of it. With a final rotation of his body, he used the only ninja technique in the entire match and body flicked himself behind her. He had not intended to use it. He had been trying to unconsciously use a substitution technique. But there was nothing but air behind the girl, so that had been what had been moved into his place. And he had accidentally tapped the secret of the jutsu. But that could wait for later. Now he had to end the match. Naruto nudged the tip of the blade to her neck and said, "It's over. You lost. Please admit defeat." "Never," she growled. Naruto applied a blow in her head, and she dropped to the ground unconscious. He supposed he could have been more gracious in knocking her out, but he didn't know that much of anatomy. It was better not to risk injuring her for real. He walked towards Kyubi and heard a soft clapping. The old woman was there. Great display of combat knowledge. I hope this lesson has been learnt. Not only by Sphelia there, but also by all of you. The old lady said, addressing the other viewers, pride is nothing but an enemy in battle. Don't let it go up your head. She walked towards the two of them and said, as the others returned to their duties, well done. Forgive us for Sphelia's actions. She has always been a little too overconfident and arrogant. I assure you she will be punished. Nah, it's alright, Naruto said dismissively. I had a friend once who was a stuck-up bastard too. Being defeated was probably punishment enough. Still, Kyubi said, it would be good for them not to try and talk ill of you in front of me. Or else he turned towards the others and cried, and for all of you, I hope this serves as a lesson. When I choose a bonding partner, I choose the best, you hear? The best. She raised his arm and did a little victory dance. The old lady was laughing again. Naruto sat on the library. He was pretty much alone, except for some random order accepted, searching for materials for their exam. It had been several weeks since he had made the reinforcement of the link between himself and the Kyubi. The vixen girl was elsewhere, probably talking to the old woman. Those two were always discussing over something, and it had been only a few days before he had discovered exactly about what. The old lady had been introducing her to modern society, explaining her the finest details of human behavior. Since she had much more experience at that than Naruto, he had left them for themselves. He had roamed around the city too, talked to the folk, who seemed to respect him a lot, to Johns, and took some lessons on hunting, which took several days on a row. Kyubi stayed behind because they seemed to think it would be best for him not to depend on her too much when it came to survival on the wild. They could never know when their link would be somehow interrupted. Given his experiences in the temple, Naruto had to agree. They still stayed in contact with each other through their mental link, but that didn't stop Kyubi from appearing positively sick from anxiety the first time he went on one of those expeditions. Now he was reading a book he had found while going randomly through the bookcases. A most interesting book. It was a sort of history book and told the tales of the world from the times of old. So far, Naruto had learned the reason for the existence of the order and some few accounts on what had happened to lay waste to the city. Apparently, there had been some sort of experimental facility, located somewhere beyond the desert that surrounded the city. A huge cataclysm happened that destroyed everything many miles around, creating the then non-existent desert, and destroying more than half the city. As time went by, all sort of bizarre creatures started to appear, not at all friendly, and a military order was created for protection of the people. Even now, centuries after the last creature appeared, the order was still up and about. The Bija had apparently been known at the time, and the organization was created based on the idolization of one of them. Coincidentally, the 12-tailed vixen goddess. Well, that explains what the old lady meant when she said Kyubi was the very foundation of the order. But Naruto had found something much more interesting. Much more interesting indeed. He was now walking to meet Kyubi, with a piece of paper on his hand and a mischievous smirk that would have caused everyone in Konoha to flee on the sight of it. He found her watching the fishes on the cages in the lake by the waterfall with the face of someone who was thinking of doing something not so right. "Oh, hello," she greeted him. "I was just seeing these fishes." "Yes, well, never mind that." He nodded. "I just found a most interesting information." "Really? About what?" she asked, frowning at his smirking face. With a flourished movement, he brought the paper into the air and started reciting, on the subject of the origin of the great. I can't read the name very well, so I'll jump this part. 12-tailed kitsune goddess. He paused to contain the laughter that dared to erupt at the sight of her face. Once upon a time, the 4 elemental spirits came down to earth to play. They were sitting beside a forest, listening to the music of the nearby river, when a small baby vixen jumped to the middle of them. Kyubi let out a screech of utter embarrassment, and snatched the paper from his hands. To her horror, though, Naruto continued to recite from memory, as if nothing had happened. It was obvious he had taken the care to memorize the text in case something like that would happen. He continued to tell the ridiculous tale of how the spirits played with the fox and later rewarded her by giving her 3 times their elemental powers, in payment for saving them on various occasions. The now tomato-red kitsune girl was chasing him back and forth across the room. If Naruto hadn't known water walking already, he would have a difficult time escaping her frantic attempts to get him. And so, the vixen goddess returned to earth, to grace us with her ever-present beauty. The end. Her frustrated yells echoed through the temple. And the old lady was laughing again. It had been almost 3 months since Naruto arrived at the shores of Berasil, and the time had come to return to his homeland. The inhabitants of the village worked together on a farewell present. They made clothes for him, colored black, that were very much similar to the ones he had been given before. Now, though, they were much more resistant, and they had added a large protector that acted like an armor between his skin and the clothes. The set was complemented by a large straw hat, also black in color, to protect him from the sun. They explained to him that his clothes were black because the kitsune would be sporting white colors, and it was fitting. Yin-yang. The hunters who had taught him also offered him a gift, a large hunting boomerang. On the day of departure, Johns gave him the directions: always walk with the sun either at your left or right side, depending on whether it is morning or afternoon. If you wish to continue journeying at night, follow the red star, and it will guide you well. All was set. The huge gates of Berasil opened, pulled by some enormous and strange mechanical device, just enough for him to get through, like it had always happened when he went hunting. Naruto bid them all farewell and, not turning back even once, left the village where he had been better treated than his homeland. What the hell is wrong with this freaking wind? There had been several days since Naruto and Kyuubi had left the village of Berasil. And since the second day they had been pursued by windstorms that swirled around them like mad ravaging dogs, never allowing them a moment of rest. It was clear to Naruto that some god, somewhere, had a huge grudge against him. Aya! You do know that screaming and threatening the wind won't have any effect, don't you? Naruto looked behind him. A girl, slightly smaller than him, with flowing white hair, followed him. 12 tails swirled around her, coming from behind her. Kitsune goddess, 12-tailed vixen, power incarnate. Her foxy ears were turned backwards in order to protect themselves from the gushing wind. Even though she had used that tone with him, he knew she too was disturbed by the wind. I'm a little thirsty, Naruto, she continued with a tired voice. Naruto threw her the skin bag and watched as she drank eagerly. He looked away from the sight, to the sky, and watched the sun. The light was dimming steadily. One more hour or so and it would be night. We'll stay here for the night, he declared. I'm going to search for some water. You stay here resting, he added before leaving their belongings at her side. No, she said with a rough voice, trying to get up. I'm not letting you go alone. He gently pushed her down. I won't be alone, he said, smiling down at her and waving the necklace she had given to him in front of her face. He turned and headed into the sunset. Naruto walked, bent forward in attentive observation. The lessons with the hunters of Berasil covered a lot of different things, from fighting with the village's grandees, a sort of elite jounin, if he was to make a bridge between them and ninja, to recognize the best place to set camp against the ravaging weather of the desert. But most importantly, they had taught him how to find water, even when there was no oasis on site. The concept itself was quite simple. There were plants where he could extract water from. The problem was finding them. They only grew next to specific trees, like the ones he was now inspecting. They were scarce, but usually they always grew in groups, so, when one actually found them, he or she would normally get a large supply of water. Finally, Naruto managed to spot a couple of dried leaves scattered across the ground in an orderly fashion. He couldn't help but smile. On the real test, he had managed to find the plants. As he started digging with his hands across the sandy ground, he couldn't help but to think of the vixen girl. Kyuubi was taking the desert crossing a lot harder than he would have thought. Truth to be told, he hadn't thought it would affect her at all, with she being a goddess and all. It hadn't been until the day before he had understood what exactly was happening. Because Kyuubi was generally a being of pure chakra, she was not used at being put under the stress that come off from having a material body. Which meant she was sensitive to extreme environments, and wasn't yet able to cope with large periods of physical activity. The way she had told him, she had only withstood with it during their fights at the Order because she would be drawing bits of his stamina to get her going. But now that they were in the desert, she couldn't risk doing it at the cost of causing his death over exhaustion. Naruto put down 2 plants he had just taken out and sighed. There were still a lot more around, but these would suffice for the night and the day following. He had thought deeply about it, and had just made a decision. They would stay at the present camp and rest until at least the day after the following. That way Kyuubi would get her rest. And he too. As much as he hated to admit, 2 weeks of desert crossing were taking their toll on him. Naruto grabbed the plants and headed back to their camp. I have decided we shall rest here for tomorrow as well, Naruto said to Kyuubi in an overly exaggerated formal speech. The girl made a small effort and rose into a seated position. Naruto wasn't sure, but he could swear she had been sleeping when he got back. Why? She asked. I thought you were trying to get back home as soon as you could manage. And I am. But I need to rest, and you too as well. Especially you. I've never had that kind of problem thanks to your healing powers, but there was this kid back in Konoha. He once had an accident that made him break one of his arms. They had to immobilize it, and after it had healed he wouldn't be able to move it at all. He had to spend months to recover the mobility. I suppose what's happening to you is something of the same type, except much more widespread. I don't want you to postpone your affairs or necessities just because of a passing weakness on my side, she answered somewhat hotly. You think I'm crazy? Naruto replied jokingly. I only once made the mistake of underestimating girls, and Sakura-chan immediately took the measures to educate myself. No, he continued, I too am feeling worn out, so if you won't stay here tomorrow for you, stay for me. I also need to rest. There, he thought, now she shouldn't be bringing any more arguments for we to take off tomorrow. Kyubi stayed silent for a few moments. She seemed to be having some sort of internal dialogue, although Naruto didn't notice any of it. He was too busy preparing the fire for the night. As he had painstakingly discovered, nights in the desert were ice cold. He was having some trouble lighting it up, though. The last of the matches he had been given by Berasil's sheaf had been used the day before, so. God damn it. If only I knew some cool fire jutsu, you'd see, you dumbwood. I'd roast you all across this desert and back. There was a flicker of movement echoing across the dusty gold, and a sparkle flew from behind him. The fire began to burn, cracking the wood slightly. Naruto turned around. I've been a little insensitive and egotistical, I hope you can forgive me. Naruto was left petrified in shock as Kyubi seemed to be extremely nervous with something, even going to the extreme of getting to her knees and touching the ground with her forehead, in a submissive manner. Kyubi? What the hell? He started. There is another way for me to cross this desert without having to be on human form. It is one of the advantages of having performed a bond with you, she interrupted him, hesitating. There is a ritual of a sorts we can do if it is successful, then we will be able to cross this desert without you having to wait for my weak body. There was bitterness in those words. A self-recriminating tone. What are you talking about? He asked, bewildered. I've been selfish and haven't taken your feelings, no, your well-being into account. I've only been thinking about me. She was trembling slightly. There's a jutsu. It can turn me into an object or something easy to carry. I don't know what it will be because it varies from conformer to conformer. I don't even remember my previous ones. She bit her lips in frustration. So you're saying we can perform this jutsu? Kyubi nodded before adding, I hope you forgive me for not telling you sooner. I just wanted to enjoy this feeling for some more time. What feeling? Naruto asked, curious. Of having a body of living. It's okay, but we'll still be staying here tomorrow. I want to have a decent nap and meals for a change. He smiled at her. Kyubi was so surprised by his reaction that he felt he needed to explain. Kyu-chan, she shivered slightly and blushed a little. If you're being selfish, you should have seen me when it comes to ramen. All people are selfish one way or another, I believe, and you've done nothing wrong out of this. We can try that jutsu tomorrow. Not before. Now jump over here and let's eat something before sleeping. Later that night, while listening to Kyubi's soft breathing, with just a hint of snoring, Naruto thought. Kyubi was just as complex as any other person he had ever encountered, if not more. She seemed pretty down, thinking she had been hindering him in some way for not telling him sooner about her ability. True, Naruto was curious as to what it would be, but he hadn't really minded her for hiding that from him. A lot more people had done a lot worse. With a sudden insight, he realized that whatever was happening between the two of them, it was just like making friends. They were testing waters, testing each other, to know how far they could go, just like how when you make a friend for the first time. It was hesitation and fear of not being accepted, he realized. He just hoped he had been able to pass the message that he had already accepted the vixen girl. He really wanted to be her friend. Naruto sighed before turning to his side, falling asleep. Sakura came to her senses with a sudden start. She had been having a dream, but she couldn't remember the details, and the memory of it was rapidly disappearing. No, it was of no use. She couldn't put her finger on what it was. All she knew was that it had left her with a warm feeling in her heart. One that was quickly disappearing after the reality started to sink in. Months had passed since that dreadful day. Months since Uchiha Sasuke had put a Chidori through his best friend's heart. Months since her life became a living hell. Those months had not been kind to Sakura. Between finding out that she had been raped by a former teammate and that the council and the Godame Hokage were considering pulling her off from active duty, she had had a very hard time. Sakura had, eventually, been able to convince Tsunade that it would be best to keep her in ninja duty. She was sure her sensei, Hatake Kakashi, had had some involvement in that decision. Exactly what he had said, however, wasn't clear. But she had no team to return to, no teammates to depart with in some mission. Even her sensei wasn't available for resuming activity, and Sai had apparently returned to Root. So she would be accompanying a new team of recently accepted genin and their respective jounin sensei, which happened to be Shikamaru. Sakura got up and looked around the room. She grabbed a towel and made her way to the small bathroom Naruto had in his apartment. Her new situation on terms of housing was just another bitter development from the events that surrounded Naruto's death. After learning of her raping, Sakura's mother had not agreed with her going back on active. This resulted in the most enormous fight Sakura's neighborhood had ever listened to, which ended with Sakura leaving her family's house. Without a place to go, she ended up settling on Naruto's place for shelter. Even after all those months, even though she knew he was gone forever, she just couldn't imagine that apartment as belonging to any other than him. She felt like an intruder. And that feeling had not changed. Not in its core at least. As she made her way to the gates of the village, Sakura thought about the upcoming mission. With Akatsuki and Orochimaru on the loose, both of them armed with one of the most potent dojutsu ever, the kaleidoscopic copying wheel eye, Mangekyo Sharingan, the fifth, along with the old farts at the council, had decided that it would be best for team missions to be accomplished with additional support. And since Sakura had no team, she supposed she qualified for it. Shikamaru had initially taken the role of teacher at the academy, along with the task of Chunin Proctor, but with his promotion to Jounin, the Godame decided to assign him a team for him to train. He had complained a lot, but Sakura knew that, deep down, he liked having a team of his own and he cared deeply for his students. How long will it be until that Chunin arrives, sensei? The question had come from a youth at his right, and Shikamaru looked down to face Natsuko. Just like her name, she sported a bright flaming red hair, like the summer setting sun. She was presently sitting on the ground, with a somewhat bored expression on her face. She won't take long. She'll be here any moment, now, Shikamaru answered with his collected voice. He was still as lazy as always, but he tried to give his students the right impression. Or maybe it was him who was getting tired of pulling always the same act. Now he just tried to sound cool on his own way, just like Asuma had. Speaking of which, he still hadn't paid Shikamaru his due for losing on another one of their shugi competitions. What? We get another girl with us? Gee, sensei, why? Why? What's with this why, Jirobaka? Are you implying we're incapable? Shikamaru smirked at the antics of his students. She spotted her right before she landed in front of them. Even though she hadn't been officially promoted yet, Sakura's skills had progressed far enough to be at least low Jounin rank. Yes, she was capable. Shikamaru observed her with a passing glance, before reaching out with his hand to greet her with a shake hands. An uninformed observer might have dismissed it as just a glance, but anyone who knew Shikamaru knew he had just recorded into his mind every single aspect of her physique. And you look how you feel, that's how they say. Sakura had bags under her eyes, which could be explaining by lack of sleep. But Shikamaru knew otherwise. It ran much more deeply than simple insomnia. The young woman was living a constant battle to hold sanity. A battle against her own conscience, against herself. She didn't smile anymore. Not like she used to. She still spared them an occasional smirk, but most of those were mirthless. Sakura had died on that day. And it would take a miracle to resurrect her again. He sighed mentally and greeted her. Good, you're here, Sakura. We're ready to leave. Shikamaru was pushed slightly to the side as the two girls in his team, Natsuko and Kyoko, stepped forward with a look of adoration on their eyes. Wow, it's Sakura-sama. Sakura-sama, can you teach us how to be as strong as you? Sorry girls, that's a secret that I will keep. Only my Shursho knows it, and I won't reveal it. Sakura answered with a smile. But the light on her eyes was off. Jiro, the only boy on the team aside from Shikamaru, didn't say anything. Like most of the males his age, he tended to regard girls as weak, but he was not about to tell that to someone who could kick his ass to the next year and back with the flick of her finger. You got everything you need, Sakura? Shikamaru asked. Sakura nodded and pointed to her backpack. I got everything right here. All my medical gear, extra weapons and supplies. I'm ready to go. Shikamaru nodded and said, Let's go, Team 10. And they scattered in the wind. As they jumped from tree to tree, Sakura decided to voice the question that had been on her mind for a while. Say, Shikamaru? What's the mission again? Shikamaru looked at her with an admired expression. You don't know? I was informed of this mission just yesterday night, and wasn't given any briefing. Nothing too hard, at least on the surface. We are to meet with our contact on Wave Country and from there, take the boat to Snow Country. You know the one you in? Yes. I know. She interrupted him. Shikamaru sighed. Well, anyways, Snow Country is interested in becoming a ninja potency and has made a deal with the Leaf and the Sand. We will oversee the development of their ninja academy and form their first-generation students. Sakura thought a little. What do we stand to gain? An ally. It made sense, Sakura thought. It was not official, but relations between the various ninja countries had been slowly deteriorating. If things were not played right, war could easily erupt. If that was to happen, Konoha would profit with any help it could accept. And Sakura had no doubt the war would come. Orochimaru would see to that. They eventually camped for the night, and Sakura engaged the younger girls in conversation. Without being very sure about how it had happened, she found herself listening to the insecurities of the two girls relating to their role on the team. Shikamaru was a good teacher, but he didn't know the mind of a girl, and some problems were too subtle to be noticed, even by him. Jiro and his sensei didn't participate in the conversation, obviously, being too busy preparing the camp. None of the girls would have admitted having troubles if they had been listening. They reminded her a lot of her old self. So don't worry. She reassured them, the only thing that matters is protecting the ones close to you. If you do that, if you work as a team, no one will censure you. Never give up. And make up your own ninja way. The girls were almost drooling when she finished her speech. I should have known only Sakura-sama would be so cool. Sakura awkwardly scratched her head, smiling. Actually, I didn't make this one up. One of my teammates used to tell this all the time. Really? Who? How was he? Sakura didn't know exactly how or when the conversation had turned to interrogation about her team. And she really didn't want to remember those painful memories. But without being able to stop herself, her mouth started to form the words she did not want to speak. He was my best friend, she said. And until that moment, she did not realize how true those words were. He was the greatest of friends, always worrying about the happiness of others. He would even throw his own life away if he thought it would help any of us. And he had great talent as well. He achieved control over a B-rank technique as an academy student. The girls openly gaped at this statement. Where is he, Sakura-sama? Sakura stayed silent until the hollow words came out of her mouth. He died. I am sorry, Sakura-sama. I didn't mean to. Kyoko tried to apologize. Of course you didn't, don't worry. Sakura smiled again. It was a tight smile, but the girls didn't seem to notice. He would never quit no matter how much difficult things seemed, she continued after a while. The girls listened, mystified. Now that I think about it, we probably made it through the Chunin exams because of him. Yes, he pulled us all the way to where we are now. Did Shikamaru-sensei know him too? Asked Natsuko. Oh yes. Next time you have time, you should ask him about him. Now we better go off help those two. I don't know how you two feel, but I don't trust men when it comes to make things like a camp right, Sakura said. It was time to finish the conversation before it went too far. She couldn't lose control. Not during a mission. Fortunately, the girls seemed to agree, and they made their way to the clearing. But no matter how much she tried to forget it, the conversation kept coming back as Sakura tried to sleep. And unbidden, memories of her lost friend kept coming back to haunt her. It took her a long time to get back to sleep. Naruto reached his best meditation state with the usual feeling of calm accomplishment he was used to feel. Opening his eyes, he saw that Kyubi was already at his side, ready to continue. It didn't surprise him. She was much better than he was. Right. I'm ready, Kyubi. What's next? You must establish a link with myself, much like that first time at the beach, remember? At his confirmation, she said, but don't fully merge with me, just establish a line of communication. Naruto was once again in front of the monolith he had seen before on his mind. But instead of the fox muzzle, there was now the figure of a humanoid female, much like the one on his necklace. He supposed it was because of the contract having been reinforced. Right, Kyubi said, not to merge. Last time I stepped fully inside it, so I suppose just touching it with one arm is enough. He reached out and placed his palm on the surface of the object. The figure glowed brightly and light engulfed him. Naruto opened his eyes once again. Kyubi was still there, but this time he heard her voice inside his head. He knew it was inside his head because she had not opened her mouth to speak. Okay, the vixen said, we are linked by mind. We must now link by heart. How do we do that? Kyubi colored deep red at this. You place my hand on my chest right above my heart. What? Naruto panicked. He was about to refuse when the thought that she might think he didn't found her pretty, or worthy in any other way, if he refused to do it. Oh, all right. Blushing brightly, Naruto placed his left hand on her left breast, at the distance of an arm, side by side with her, as she had instructed. He trembled involuntarily at the soft contact. There was a deep, soft sigh from Kyubi. Naruto looked just in time to see an expression of something on her face, before she closed her eyes. What happened next surprised him to no end. Kyubi's body sort of liquefied, turning silver and rearranged itself like water around his body. Her face became a mask of a sorts, a mask of a fox, and placed itself near his heart. The remaining of the body became a suit. A trench coat made of a silvery fabric he couldn't identify. White fur surrounded his neck and the ends of the coat's arms. But it wasn't hot, even though he was on a desert. White gloves completed the set. "So what do you think?" he heard Kyubi say nervously. The mask had lifted to his eye level. Naruto smirked playfully. "Just wait until we show this to the guys back home." Naruto sat near the river he and Kyubi had just reached. Small grass grew along with sporadic trees in the immediate surroundings. Up the mountain chain known as the Jaw, the trees gathered and proliferated, forming small woods that eventually interconnected into a large forest. Even farther up, however, the vegetation withered away and the mountains showed their exposed sides to the sunlight. The peaks were invisible, covered in clouds. Even though the mountains had been visible for days, Naruto had never seen the clouds scatter. Not even once. The crossing of the desert had been a difficult one, and it had left its mark on him. On both of them, for Kyubi's body seemed to react to outside stimuli even in her cloak form. Naruto had tried the mask a few times and discovered that his senses were enabled to extreme, which proved useful in hunting, when their food began to get scarce. They had been lucky. After leaving the desert, Naruto had managed to get as much meat and vegetable food as he could, and he had no doubt they would need it before they reached the other side of the Jaw. With the extreme effort the crossing had required, he had further developed his physical condition. He could now withstand gruesome physical exercises, even more than before. He also sported a heavy tan, which somewhat concealed its more pronounced whisker marks. Although his skin color would, in the times to come, return somewhat to its normal shade, he would forever be gifted with a darker tone, as if he frequented the beaches of wave country every day of its life. This would only contribute to make his bright blonde hair stand out, as well as his unusual blue eyes. Kyubi too was more tanned, but since her skin color was already darker, the effects hadn't been so visible. After they